My task right now, I have the very important task, and it's quite a pleasure and honor to introduce Michael Reyes. He has the enormous task of leading our San Antonio Housing Authority, which is now Opportunity Home San Antonio, bringing this organization into a transformative era. And this is a place that we call home for San Antonio, and we want this to be a place that is called home for everyone. He knows firsthand what it is like for our families, having lived in our communities at Alazan Apache as a child. So he has that passion and understanding of what our families are going through. He brings many years of public affairs experience and public service to this role, as well as service to boards and, of course, being a tremendous advocate for affordable housing. So without further ado, I introduce Michael Reyes, President and CEO of Opportunity Home San Antonio.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for being here. It's a Friday cold morning, so we really appreciate you making the time to be here. Welcome to the 2025 Affordable Housing Outlook event. There's so many folks here to thank for being here. We have nonprofit housing here, government, academia, the private sector, so thank you all for being here. I want to make a special thank you or acknowledgement to our Chief Housing Officer, Mark Kimona, who collaborated with us on this event, so appreciate Mark for all your help. This event is also streaming, so I want to thank those watching us online. As we get started, I thought it would be appropriate to introduce our organization the proper way. Who are we? What is Opportunity Home? Formally, we are an 88-year-old independent public corporation established by state statute to administer HUD programs, services, financing for low-income residents earning up to 80% of the area median income. That's the formal description. Informally, we are a people-focused organization made up of idealists seeking a chance for a better life. We are an organization where half of our residents are children who deserve a brighter future. Therefore, in many ways, this is a children's organization. We are also an organization that supports older adults who deserve to age in place with dignity and respect. And above all, we are an organization of opportunities. We have been for 88 years, and we must continue to be for the next 88 years. And that leads me to why we're here today. It's important to reflect on our successes and lessons learned from last year, look at the current conditions now, and look ahead to the rest of the year to see what's on the pike. This organization has to serve in a leadership role and be the authority on affordable housing as the largest affordable housing provider in San Antonio and the largest provider in the state. This is not a one-time event, but the start of ongoing dialogue throughout the year and each year moving forward. Today's discussions are a precursor to our ambitious strategic plan. We will soon embark on a 12-year vision leading up to our organization's 100th anniversary in 2037. I'm calling it the Centennial Vision. It'll be our long-term commitment, our roadmap to preserving and producing affordable housing. We also need to ensure it aligns with our city's strategic housing implementation plan, in which we serve as a partner. But first, though, we need to discuss our current reality. These are uncertain times nationally, with the prospects of HUD staff in the thousands being terminated and around the country and in Washington, which will all hinder programs and financing. In addition, the challenges in the affordable housing sector remain, including high interest rates, construction costs, insurance rates, and accessing gap financing. At our organization, we will continue to face underfunding of public housing while facing about $500 million in maintenance across our housing portfolio. And that is B for billion. The status quo is not sustainable. More than ever, it's important to have community solidarity and collaboration in overcoming these challenges. I'm confident we will work together and meet the challenges ahead of us. I'm confident because I'm hopeful. I'm hopeful about what lies ahead. As a moving to work organization, which is fancy HUD language to mean we have flexibility in how we use our dollars, we have to refocus and renew our federally mandated objectives, and that means three things. First, we have to give residents a chance to live where they want to, not where we want them to live. It's about choice. Second, it's about using federal dollars efficiently. And perhaps most importantly, we have to be innovative in our approach. Innovation is our federal mandate. We have to ensure the organization is financially sound moving forward, and that it has to have the resources to provide affordable housing for many years to come. As we move forward and plan for the future, I'm mindful to look back at all those before us at our organization who did the hard work in providing affordable housing opportunities for our city. My predecessor from a few decades ago, the late and great Congressman Henry B. Gonzalez, who led the call for dignified housing. The many public servants over the decades who served these organizations. We have three special moms who worked at our organization. The mom of Congressman Joaquin Castro, the Congressman Tony Gonzalez, and Councilwoman from District 3, Melissa Cabello Haverda. All their moms worked at our organization. They dedicated their service to our organization for many years, and of course the list goes on and on. We stand on their shoulders and now have the responsibility to provide new housing opportunities to new generations of San Antonians. In closing, our sleeves are rolled up. They literally are rolled up. Our energy is teed up, our spirits are high, and our vision is on the horizon. There is so much good work ahead of us. But for now and for today, we look forward to an active engagement, active dialogue today at this forum. And for those of you joining us online, thank you again for listening in. Please keep the conversation going, and thank you for taking the time to be with us. We appreciate everyone here and everyone online. And with that, please welcome a great leader and colleague and the captain of our ship, our city's Chief Housing Officer, Mark Carmona.
These are uncertain times, but I think everybody in this room is emboldened and ready to take on those times. I was talking with somebody earlier today, was at the Capitol quite a bit this week, talking about housing affordability. And I'm glad we're having this event today, but what it makes me realize and appreciate about our community is that we, compared to the rest of the state, we're doing pretty well. We aren't afraid of taking on challenges. When you talk to people in the Capitol and they're just now talking about accessory dwelling units, but we're gonna have problems in our community, we've done that. When you talk about community land trust and people are like, well, that's a new idea, it's a new innovation, we'll have to see how it works, we're doing that. So think about all of the innovation, think about not only the things that are in the strategic housing implementation plan, but that our community says are important. Think about the viable partner that Opportunity Home San Antonio is on the Commons at Acequia. Our new, it developed across the finish line, 200, what's the number, Nikisha? 201. 201 units of permanent supportive housing in our community. Single site. We'll have services, we'll have everything there for people. We had a great event this week that the Housing Trust, ULI, and Close to Home helped put on about opportunities for youth that are experiencing housing stability. That's gonna, I think, result in housing for youth in the first time for our city. How about that? So, but that's what I'm talking about. You know, that's who we are. That's who our spirit is. That's what today's about. I can't thank Opportunity Home San Antonio, Michael Reyes, their CEO, enough for hosting this. We're friends in this room. We work together. You could feel it when we were walking in the room. Everybody's catching up. Everybody's giving an abrazo. And just being together, that's our strength, right? So today, let's take our strength and let's continue to build on it. We've done so much so far, but there's so much more to do in our community. From public information campaign, addressing people that need new frames about affordable housing. NIMBY's a real deal in our community, but we're trying to address it. Looking at all the other issues, you know, making sure that housing bond dollars are being utilized, preparing for the next housing bond in 2027. There's a lot to talk about. There's a lot of opportunity. We don't know what's going to happen at the state. We certainly don't know what's going to happen at the federal level. Some are going to SA to DC in a couple of weeks, hoping to grab some intel, hoping to bring it back home so that we can put it into our database of knowledge and ideas and see how do we continue moving forward. We're not sitting back. We don't get paralyzed by this information. We're continually looking at what's the intel that you can give us, because the work is our focus. And I think that's our superpower, is the work is our focus. We're very focused on building out affordable housing units, looking at the causal relationship between homelessness and housing, and how do we work systematically together? How do systems, what's the interconnected point? How do we work those together? Housing is healthcare. housing is workforce, housing is transportation. We are broadening the definition of what that looks like, and we're broadening the definition of what that means in our community. We want people to have double benefits of transportation and affordable housing. We've got to think that through, but we've got the people in the room that can make that happen. So I'm extremely excited about today. I was happy to be one of the hosts in developing this today. I think we need this forecast. If we would have done it when we were originally supposed to do it, probably wouldn't have been as good as it is today. So thank you for the freeze, even though it's cold today, sorry. But I think timing is everything. So Michael, team, thank you. Ayanna, thank you so much for pulling this together. And thank you for everyone being here today. And I think let's get to work. I think it's time to start with our first panel. Thank you.
As you look back over 2024, what are you most proud of, and what sticks with you as something you really want to tackle this year? And you want to start with this?
I would say the thing that sticks with me most, that's pressing for me, is that last year we celebrated the lives of 364 individuals in San Antonio who passed away while experiencing homelessness. That's the highest number in the 17 years that we've been hosting that memorial, and we understand that homelessness and housing and affordable housing are inextricably linked. And so finding solutions for that probably is the thing that is most pressing for me. One of the things that I will say we continue to excel at, that I've seen over the last 5 years, is the collaboration amongst partners. The city did some fantastic things in selecting Mark Carmona as the Chief Housing Officer and engaging this homeless huddle that's now become our homeless response system to address homelessness in our community, and passing an affordable housing bond, right? We've seen so many successes over the last several years, and continuing that momentum moving forward will be tremendous.
Well, first of all, you stole a little bit of my thunder. I did want to say, returning to San Antonio after being gone for nearly 5 years, I did see a lot of strides as a city in addressing affordable housing in a different fashion, right? The PSH and permanent supportive housing collaborations that have occurred, which are still working today, at least with our agency, and a lot of the work that we're doing with other agencies to address the needs of homelessness, is something new for the city, for me, as I said, just returning, but also before leaving, when the city was talking about and interviewing for the Chief Housing Officer position, that was new. And that was an innovative thought that the city had to help collaborate and coordinate everybody. So congratulations to Mark for that role, but also congratulations on all the work that's happening as from his department and bringing everybody together. And I would say that those are some of the same successes. And as an agency, as Opportunity Home, with the bonds being implemented as well, we're reaping some of those benefits. We're getting some of those funds. We're able to help use those dollars to maintain some of our public housing stock, which is some of the oldest apartment complexes in the city that need a lot of love and a lot of attention, so that we can preserve affordable housing for these communities. And so for me, what really stands out is just the collaboration, and what I see as a city and all of the agencies working together, even coming together earlier this week again, talking about the permanent supportive housing needs and working with and trying to address the needs of homeless youth. And so those are all huge initiatives, and we want to keep those going. And we also want to continue collaborating and figure out innovative ways to preserve our existing stock, as I mentioned earlier, that need a lot of love and a lot of attention. So just the collaboration is really promising to me joining the organization. So I want to give kudos to everybody there. I'm just excited to be part of an agency that's on the cusp of doing new things and really addressing the affordable housing needs in the city. So, thanks.
Thank you for that question. For the city of San Antonio, in just a few short years, we have truly, with the historic affordable housing bond, changed the landscape of housing. And to date, we have committed $115 million to preserve and produce our affordable housing in this community. And what's great about that is it's through collaboration. We look to the Housing Commission, we look to our SHIP partners, Bexar County, the Housing Trust, and of course Opportunity Home, to help us achieve that along with community and people. So that is a big success. Challenges, I think everyone, as I look around this room, are pretty familiar with our challenges, and I'll keep it simple. A lot of demand for our very limited affordable housing resources. We need more affordable housing options. And truthfully, we don't have enough money. However, the city is committed and working with urgency and care to ensure that we are increasing our affordable housing stock, and we can't do it alone. So I'm very grateful for our partnerships, because the key here is collaboration.
Passing the microphone, little telephone. Well, and so you mentioned the SHIP, and there has been, you can go online, there's this great dashboard, you can kind of see all of the progress being made. But there's a very distinct disparity between the progress being made for the higher AMIs, the area median incomes, and the lower, the deeper affordability units. Certainly, I would think that permanent supportive housing is also kind of in that scale as well. What are some of the? Is there any plan to kind of adjust those goals, because we've exceeded some goals, right, in the SHIP? Even last year, a couple years ago. Is this going to be kind of a living document that we can expect to see updated more regularly with more ambitious goals for various AMI levels, for instance? Sorry.
Number one, NHSD and our partners are definitely discussing recalibrating those goals. When we're trying to serve deeper affordability, it comes with its own challenges. So getting together with our partners and discussing what that analysis looks like and involving the community is essential. Unfortunately, San Antonio has experienced segregation and a history of poverty. And with 18% of our families and community living in poverty, that is significantly higher than our national average of 11.5%. And the point is, we need to help our families, and we can't do it if we don't recalibrate our goals to ensure that we're aligning with the true need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Sorry. Well, and do you feel that work? Sorry to focus on you so much. Could be supported, with a potentially bigger bond. I mean, we had a $150 million bond, as you mentioned. $150 million today isn't worth $150 million in the future. I mean, do you expect that? Would y'all expect to see a bigger investment from the city's bond into not only 60% AMI, 30% permanent supportive housing, as well, maybe expanding into that space with the next housing bond? You want to answer that, Keisha?
I'm going back to Veronica.
Okay. So I definitely can't speak for the voters of the city of San Antonio, but I think in conversations through our city leadership and a lot of our partners, we do see there's a need. And like I mentioned, if we're a city that many of our families are living under poverty, we need those resources. And one of the challenges I mentioned is we definitely don't have enough money, which, while that is true, we're very fortunate that in San Antonio we collaborate. And what I mean by that is, most significantly, when we leverage funding and we leverage our resources and we come together, and that's not typical for every city. I'm so very proud of the city of San Antonio and all of our partners like Opportunity Home, Bexar County, Housing Trust, a lot of the developers in this room and nonprofits. We come together and we leverage our resources. while we await perhaps maybe an increase in our affordable housing bond, which, you know, is essential to continue the important work that we're doing as a community.
You want me to reiterate?
You can add, yes,
yeah,
please.
I would just reiterate, at least from my perspective.
Okay.
You know, the housing bond money, as Veronica mentioned, 150 million. For those developers in the room today, you know, 150 million is not really a lot of money. You know, and when you're looking at the overall needs in San Antonio and surrounding. But as she mentioned, the leveraging and the collaboration to really address the needs of affordable housing, we all know this is something, I presume we all know, that it's public and private partnerships that will get this done. Leveraging the private equity, leveraging the private dollars, working with those agencies and entities that can get these units on the ground and find the financing, but using bond money and any other funding source that can be provided from a government perspective as seed money. And leveraging those dollars is really what needs to happen. And I can't reiterate enough, to address the need, you know, we as Opportunity Home, as an authority in housing, are one entity, but we don't have all the money. Not one agency has all the money. So it takes partnerships and innovative thinking on how you leverage those dollars, convert subsidies, utilize those subsidies to really leverage all the financing that's needed to get units on the ground is really I would say the way to success. You know.
I'll just close by saying, as a nonprofit homeless service provider, over the last 2.5 years, I've learned that the units that have the deepest affordability are the most expensive to finance. And so, yes, selfishly, we want more funds in housing bond and other resources that are available in community to produce the deepest affordability, and with the potential cuts that we anticipate on the horizon, there are going to be even greater opportunities to provide support for those who need the deepest affordability.
Yeah. Well, oh gosh, thank you. Well, and Jose, you mentioned you don't have all the money in the world, which bummer, you know. But I'm reminded of a story that I covered as a journalist with Opportunity Homes, you know, financial struggles to kind of make ends meet, and considering all of the maintenance and operations costs that you have. And as a moving to work agency, you know, some funding is supposed to be set aside for innovation that has had to be used for maintenance and operations and things like that. Could you provide a bit of an update on that? Like, is there any kind of time, maybe Michael would be a better person for this, but a time frame for that, for Opportunity Home to kind of dig itself out of that situation and begin to use that money in a more innovative way?
For starters, I would need my CFO to really give you a detail.
Sure, yeah.
But
We don't need the details.
but really, yes, as a moving to work agency, we do have that opportunity and flexibility to shift funds around to address programmatic needs. And anyone who's been in the arena of a public housing agency or even a near public housing agency understands that given the age of public housing units, these are public housing units, and the capital needs that exist, and the amount of funding that the federal government provides to operate those is a huge gap. Mm-hmm. There's always a shortage of dollars, and we're looking at an annual deficit just to operate those units. Now, using the funds, using bond money, using other dollars, public-private partnerships, and leveraging that to redevelop public housing is a way out. Mm-hmm. No detailed plans, but that is again as I mentioned earlier, sort of the methodology that would be needed to be evaluated and determined for every public housing property in our portfolio to see how do we best reset that asset? How do we best reset those units for the number one reason, which is to provide an update and for the families. You know, new units, redeveloped units, modern amenities for all of our lowest of the low income families in San Antonio. And that's who we serve in the public housing arena. And it's, in my opinion, not fair that they're living in older and antiquated units. So it's incumbent upon us as an agency and as a community to figure out how do we leverage partnerships, funding to reset those assets, not only for those families, but also for other families who are sitting on our waiting lists. That is our charge. That is our responsibility. And you know, I'm just looking forward as an agency, just joining this team to be able to figure out that path.
I'm just going to take 30 seconds to shout out Michael Reyes, because even amidst the public conversations about the positioning of Opportunity Home, Opportunity Home did not hesitate to look at ways to support permanent supportive housing in innovative ways, and through project-based vouchers coming into the Commons at Acequia Trails. That makes a difference in our ability to get a project across the finish line. So in a space where you can choose to live in a silo and be selfish, Opportunity Home did not, and helped our project become successful. And so that's just a shout out to Opportunity Home and the team and Michael.
Yeah, and I spoke with the Housing Trust a bit about the Commons at Acequia and how close it was to not actually happening a few weeks ago. And I wonder if you could tell us a little bit more about the single site permanent supportive projects that you have, the Hudson and now future Commons at Acequia. What are some of the lessons learned at Hudson that you'll be using as you build out the Commons?
So Sam Ministries attempted to convert a 60-year-old multifamily property to serve as site-based permanent supportive housing. What I learned is, if you're going to convert something, don't take the 60-year-old property and try to convert it, because it requires a whole lot more budget dollars than you anticipate up front. But the cost per door is significantly less than what we are anticipating for the Commons. But we've had to retrofit a number of things as it relates to the Hudson that we're able to account for in design relative to the Commons at Acequia Trails. For some of us in the room, the Commons at Acequia Trails has been a project for 2.5 years, right? So Pete and I had a conversation about this when the housing bond first came out, many, many moons ago. And so understanding design decisions that need to go into development, and please note, Sam Ministries is not an affordable housing developer. We are a nonprofit homeless service provider, and that is our area of expertise. But in community, there is an opportunity to increase service provision. Sam Ministries can't be the only permanent supportive housing provider, and so how we collaborate with partners like Opportunity Home and even new homeless service providers coming into community is important if we want to reach our SHIP goals for the delivery of that medium. But the financing of permanent supportive housing is likely the largest lesson. We can talk about trauma-informed design, we can talk about partnership and collaboration, but the financing has been the most difficult thing, and the reason that it's taken 2.5 years. The second piece is community sentiment and community engagement around not just permanent supportive housing, because I still think we have a long way to go with community understanding what permanent supportive housing is, but just affordable housing. I went to a neighborhood association meeting where there was a senior project on the agenda right after the commons, and the neighborhood didn't want that either. So they don't want senior housing, they don't want permanent supportive housing, they don't want anything that's not market rate, multifamily, or single family homes. And so community sentiment and how we engage our community will be important going forward. I think we have some successful opportunities with Town Twin Village, with our Hudson Apartments, and with the Commons that's coming online to be able to show community that this works and is a positive solution, which will be important. But the financing piece is going to continue to be a sticky widget.
Well, and I wonder if y'all could share your perceptions of public perception. Like, have we made progress in terms of like defining what housing affordability is for the community at large? Obviously, we still have a problem with NIMBYism, but maybe share with us what you've seen has worked in terms of really explaining what housing affordability is and isn't when talking to community about these projects. We can go to.
Yeah, you want to start with Veronica?
Yeah.
Actually, again, looking to the Housing Commission and our partners, we were able to host a very successful event with over 700 attendees. This was an event that we hold annually to make sure that we are conducting ourselves with transparency on how we are reaching our SHIFT goals. But what was exciting about that is attendees of all walks of life across the city of San Antonio, they were able to engage in conversations about affordable housing. We were also had the opportunity to showcase our first video in terms of homelessness and those trying to combat those misconceptions of what affordable housing means and what it means for a family who's unsheltered. I got the experience to be in a classroom where there was very honest and authentic dialogue around it, and I think that's what we need more of. What I hear is more storytelling, right? Not just putting numbers. So when I talk about numbers, whether it be 80% AMI, or I talk about this historic $150 million affordable housing bond, and the units we're producing, and it's exciting to share with you all of the success. At the end of the day, these are homes that belong to families. This is where a senior can age in place. It's a nurse, it's a medical assistant, a school teacher. Those stories are important because we have families who need to share these stories. Of course, understanding that not everybody wants to be the face of these stories, but our team, working with our partners, have done it very thoughtfully, and again, with a sense of urgency and care, to share what the public is seeing as misconceptions, because we can't do our work if we're not doing it as a community. And to your sentiment, there are folks who maybe, I truly believe San Antonio is a compassionate city, and we do have good intentions, but if we are misinformed, we're not able to be better neighbors. So part of our public information campaigns stretch from everything from renters' rights and responsibilities to property tax help campaign, and of course, combating those misconceptions around affordable housing and inviting dialogue with the community.
Was that?
So, as Veronica mentioned, one of the strongest ways of addressing community concerns is the storytelling. The impact of someone's grandmother, or the impact it has on their daughter or child or sister, or even themselves, is really what resonates. When we get so far in a community meeting into the weeds on what happens with the numbers, with the dollars, with the programs and program requirements, it scares people, and while a lot of that information should and has to be provided to the community that is being impacted, it still needs to come with, at the end of the day, this is what will result and who it will impact. And we always need to show what's happening behind the curtain, from a transparency standpoint. And I know from a public housing agency standpoint, there are always concerns that a public housing resident is going to be displaced, and we cannot reiterate enough all the rules, all the expectations, and even our mission as an agency to continue providing the affordable housing and keeping people housed as our mission has to be pushed forward and portrayed in any community meetings and events that we have for residents as we move forward with new developments.
I think a part of what we're doing right is proactively taking the message into community. We have our city council persons hosting town halls that are just about education. It's not because there's a new development that's going up in District 5 that we're sitting together and having that conversation. And so we're proactively trying to bring the message into community about what baseline is for affordable housing, and here's what it means for our community. And I think that's helping, instead of only going into the community when the development is going to go up, which has been my experience, right? And so I think that delivering that message up front so that people understand before it's in their neighborhood is also a thing that we're getting right here in San Antonio.
Thank you. Well, and I think there's, well, Mark mentioned it earlier, that the intersection of housing with all the other like social determinants of health, it's transportation, it's food, it's education. What do you feel, and this is for the group, whoever wants to start, is, and maybe it is housing, is one of the biggest barriers to breaking the cycle of generational poverty in San Antonio? Maybe it's housing, maybe it's not. I know we're a housing group up here, but.
So, as a woman of color, it's never lost on me that there are systemic inequities that exist in San Antonio and every community, and if I don't say it, I miss an opportunity. So let me start with that. So part 2 of that is addressing an affordable living wage in our community, and the city has done some great work in terms of programming to help bring up the living wage, but that's going to be pivotal in getting families and individuals out of poverty. We can do everything that we want relative to affordable housing, but until we solve the root cause of the issue, education and employment, we won't advance. We'll be continuing to have this conversation around building more affordable housing. Just my 2 cents.
Yes.
I believe we have some social determinants of health experts in the audience, Scott and Brad. Agreed. So affordable housing is one piece of it, but economic growth is the other side, and to really impact that, you need an educated workforce. You need to provide the services and really target, audiences and residents who have that need to really elevate themselves and hopefully help them elevate themselves into a better paying role, a better paying job. And that is huge. So it's a two-sided coin here, that you have the housing affordability, but you got to provide some level of educational services and partnerships, and that is something that we are looking at to expand as well for Opportunity Home with our community development initiatives.
I mentioned earlier, San Antonio, while it's rich in culture and vibrant communities, it has experienced a history of segregation and poverty. So it's difficult, to talk about what's the missing ingredient, because there's so many layers to it and it's complex, and you all have chimed in on some excellent points. From NHSD's perspective, what we have seen and what we know it can be successful is pairing housing with supportive services. So whether it's a family who needs, we know poverty is passed on generation to generation, but if we can break it by pairing housing with supportive services, whether it's workforce development or after-school care, something the NHSD is very adamant about is looking at the family as a whole and a holistic approach. I think the best example of that is permanent supportive housing, when we're helping families that are experiencing homelessness connect to resources to ensure they have everything from case management to mental health services. This could really break that cycle. And we're very proud that the city has already under construction 477 PSH units. That means we're 50% of our SHIP goal of 1,000 units in alignment with the homeless strategic plan. So that's very exciting, and I do think that's one of the missing ingredients is continuing to pair housing with supportive services and resources to help our families.
Right. Right. Well, and I think it's about time that we wrap up. We've got about 5 minutes left, but I wonder if you could kind of end this conversation about what your North Star is going to be for 2025. Like, what is the one thing, like your top priority, to get across the finish line this year?
That's a heavy one. My top priority for 2025 is to bring the Hudson Apartments back online. Being able to facilitate site-based permanent supportive housing from that property will be significant in reducing the wait list for permanent supportive housing, but will also be significant for our community. I want to point out that that property sits in Castle Hills. So when you think about NIMBYism, we're at the heart of where NIMBYism occurs, and we don't have the issue with the Hudson Apartments today that we did 18 months ago, and we want to be able to continue to demonstrate positive momentum.
I have two, and I know one is probably a bigger reach for 1 year than the other, but the simple one right now is to continue our efforts with our Housing Choice Voucher Program and really educating private landlords so that we can continue to provide more affordable housing units for our families who are seeking homes with those vouchers, and really working it out so that it's still affordable for those folks to be in our program. So that's huge. The second is, as we just mentioned, we talked about educating and providing, the services and support services for our families, and this is a little more specific to public housing, but really redeveloping our community development initiatives plan, create more partnerships with external agencies within the city to bring in those services to address the economic growth of the families and education of the families, so that they can elevate themselves to an extent from a financial standpoint.
For NHSD particularly, it's something I keep repeating, but it's collaboration, and that is key to our SHIP plan and reaching our goals. This collaboration is crucial to ensuring that we work with our partners, Housing Commission, again, Bexar County Opportunity Home and Housing Trust. This collaboration with our nonprofits and developers is crucial to ensure that we stay the course with SHIP, and that is our biggest priority.
Right, thank you. All right, well, and that kind of concludes our panel of First Session 1. Please give our panelists a round of applause. Thank you.
I recently joined Opportunity Home as Chief of Staff. I came from having worked at City Hall for about 6.5 years, almost 7, on various policies, but most importantly, we prioritized housing policy, particularly in the last 3 to 4 years. However, I do have, so that being said, I have great friendships at City Hall and some relationships in the state. So, some of you may or may not know this. I happen to be the little sister of Senator Jose Menendez. That guy right there.
Little.
So I'm reading the bio and I'm like, do I really have to read this? It's actually interesting. But I'm sure many of you guys have heard from him and have heard his bio, so I will save us all from reading it as much as I love it because it includes my parents. But because I am very familiar with him, I am familiar with the schedules of electeds. And so, of course, he comes in and tells me I've got 5 minutes. And I'm like, really? That being said, we're going to take this a little out of order. We're going to start with our state legislative update, simply because of his time constraint and because all of these things are very important. So I hope the panelists will humor me. We will start with the time-sensitive gentleman to the far left. And ask him, just get right down to business because that's what we do best, is if you could tell us about some of the legislative bills you may have heard or have seen that may directly or indirectly affect affordable housing.
I think I'm mic'd up. Am I
Yes.
not? Oh, but I have to do this
Yes.
too? Okay. All right. So I think there are three of them that I can think come up to mind quickly. One has to do with private activity bonds, some funding there. I think Alvarado and Plesa, those two, I think, get some legs. It'll be interesting to see it. We have a new leadership in the Texas House, a new speaker. Unfortunately, both chambers are more, even though this may seem hard for you to believe, but they are more conservative than they were 2 years ago. And there was a concerted effort on behalf of the governor, lieutenant governor, to move the chambers further to the right, which is not always a good thing for affordable housing. I will tell you this. There is a gentleman from North Texas. His name's Senator Tan Parker. And Tan is very interested in reducing the issue of homelessness around the state. And so I think we have an opportunity to marry the two issues in terms of if you want to reduce the number of unhoused people, then you need to make affordable housing more available. I think that is something we need to sort of connect the dots for them. And so with that in mind, I think Senator Alvarado's got a good bill on private activity bonds. I think that there are people that make life more difficult for us when we have these housing finance corporations from small areas traveling the state, trying to do deals. I think San Antonio's got like 11, you said the other day, that are not from here. And I mean, all of a sudden you look up and you're like, who the hell's this doing what, where, why? And that is going to cause a problem for us, especially if they go into communities where they're already hypersensitive to properties coming off the tax rolls. Harris County is being one of the main ones. And so you got to realize Harris County, not only does it have 30% of the population and 30% of the votes come out in statewide elections, because of that, they send the lieutenant governor up to Austin. And so because of that, you have a huge population of state House members and senators. And so they are very hypersensitive to the issues. I think, too, because of the huge population in Harris County, Houston in particular, land values have gone through the roof. And so it is almost impossible to make an affordable housing deal work. And so to have these people coming in off and taking things that aren't adding actual units, but they're just taking land property off the tax rolls, that does a damage to what we're all trying to do. I mean, the first panel was great, and it was great to hear y'all talk about serving people who through no fault of their own in many cases are on the streets. And I want to give a shout out to what you're doing at Sam Ministries, because every night at around 12:30 or 1 o'clock in the morning, I have a 25-year-old come home from being out helping people get off the road. And he tells me about the things that he's doing, and it just breaks my heart, and it makes me proud at the same time. And I want to thank you all for the work that y'all do. And the NIMBYism that Castle Hills, is that the same one that was a convent right there on Blanco? I was on city council when we had to do the vote to make that a Sam Ministries property. And that was we had to overturn the wishes of the councilman from that district, which that doesn't happen often. But we overrode that. Remember Deborah? Deborah was on that council. And, it was all NIMBYism, and it was all Castle Hills NIMBYism. And we did the right thing, and so thank God for that. So, it's a hard thing that you guys do. You're at your campus, and the thing that y'all do is very difficult. So we have to do more. I don't know if I covered your question.
You did. You covered many of the ones that we had concerns with, but because of the time and because we are all partners in this, I do want to give an opportunity. Does anyone have a question that you'd like to ask the senator about legislation? He has about 5 to 10 more minutes with us.
Housing finance.
And come on up, Pete. Or yell it and I'll repeat it.
Okay.
I like Pete's
I'm all about putting them on the
Oh,
spot.
that's excellent.
You know, this past week, we were at Austin, meeting with several state representatives and senators. And one of the items we were really talking about was the misalignment between education and housing. I understand that you may be sponsoring a bill regarding education and housing. Maybe you can talk a little bit about that.
Okay, you caught me off guard. Anybody know what he's talking about?
Hector?
Which one?
The threshold when they, because some schools are failing, some
Yeah,
school districts.
yes.
And so TDHJ is married them.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Therefore, they prevent us from reinvesting in their.
So sometimes because of some rules, well, you know, that was a lawsuit that put us in this position, as we all remember. And it was well-intentioned. And sometimes in the community, we have thoughts that through our really good intentions saying, well, why should only affordable housing be only in areas where the opportunities aren't the best, or maybe the schools aren't the best? Shouldn't we have them in high opportunity areas? And so that was a lawsuit. The state lost, and it impacted how we can put it. But it makes it that much harder sometimes, especially when you have every state representative has a veto in their back pocket through the letters to actually get more affordable housing done. So yes, so we need to address the fact that there are schools that are improving in the inner city that the demand for affordable housing is still great. And so we need to address that issue. The other one is the 2-mile rule. I mean, cities should determine whether or not they want to have another affordable housing unit within 2 miles of themselves or not us. You know, I know why Senator West did that, because there was such a concentration of affordable housing units being put in certain parts of certain communities. So it looked like you were just putting all of the poor in one part of town. And so that's what led also to the lawsuit. And so at the end of the day, local elected officials know better than state elected officials, especially those of us who are in Senate districts where we represent 1 million people. And so my district will go reach from Highway 90 and 1604 on the south west side of town all the way to Converse, Live Oak, and Windcrest on the northeast side of town. And so, you know, it is such a broad cross section that at the end of the day, you know, if you're talking about a small community that needs it, and you know, the councilwoman says to me, I understand there's 1.5 miles away from there, but now between those 2 miles, there's 2 different churches, 3 different elementaries, and there's a need is great.
Thank you so much, Senator. Thank you, Pete. Anyone else?
Go ahead.
Okay. Senator, I'm a HUD housing counselor with our CASAs. One of the biggest problems that I'm seeing, and I know a lot of the concentration of what here's today, we're talking about rental, but my issue is with mortgage people and mortgage owners. What's happening in San Antonio is, especially in the foreclosure arena, is that a lot of these small investment companies are going around acting like mortgage companies, but yet are not governed by the RESPA laws that the CFPB.
Right.
So when those people go into foreclosure, there's only one solution: pay up or get out. Whereas in the traditional mortgage companies, there's options.
Right.
So if these investors in these small LLCs that are doing, well, I'll give you, you don't qualify for a mortgage, but I'm gonna give you a chance. I'm gonna take a risk on you. But yet they don't have to follow the regulations. And I feel that if there can be some type of legislation that governs them that says, if you're gonna act like a mortgage company, then follow the rules like a regular mortgage company.
Right. That all makes sense. Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, you know, I hope CFPB is still around for, you know, I mean, I hope HUD's still around, you know,
I'm making a couple of calls this week already, and already they're not taking calls already.
Yeah, I was with someone who used to be at HUD this week. They were in my office, and they're telling me they're getting calls from DC. They've already cut 7,500 people, and they're looking to do another cut. Yeah, things, these are scary and frightening times. But let's get to your question. Yes, the answer is yes. Should anybody making mortgage loans should be working under the same conditions that every other mortgage lender, they should, of course. truth in lending, have to see your document before you close, what are you going to be paying, what your interest rate is, what's the interest that you're going to pay over the life of the loan, all of those things. And most importantly, can you work something out in the event of, you can't make payments? Absolutely. But even before we get to that, what are we going to do about contract for deeds? And what do we do about people who are being potentially se vende por dueño, and they're not really buying the house. And so then again, what are we doing about the $150 million bond package the city has to repair people's homes? And the fact the city is not putting out enough money out there because they haven't fixed the chain of title for folks. So these are issues. So we have in our communities families who, multi-generational families, and then let's say the first generation passes away and the next just live there, and they never go probate a will, they never change the title, the name of the title. So then they go apply for the loan for the city to get a ramp put in or the roof fixed, and they can't because they're not in the proper chain. We got to fix and address these issues as well. So there's a lot of things we got to work on. I look forward to working with all of you.
Thank you. I will say, Senator, you're going to miss out, but we will have Dr. Roger Enriquez later on a panel, and he will touch on just those issues. And kudos to Mock, who just got their, I don't remember the name of it, but they work on title clearance, and they just got funded from the city. So thank you to the city.
All right.
Woohoo!
I got a name and number for some attorneys for Fernando.
Good morning. My name is Rosemary Anguiano Zuniga. I am the daughter of the late Roberto Anguiano. Those of you who know him well and know that he was a huge advocate for improving the quality of life, particularly in the Mission San Jose Neighborhood Association. He was one of the co-founders that established that neighborhood association. He's also one of the co-founders of the largest trash pickup on the rivers, and I think the Basura Bash is happening tomorrow, so we shall see how that goes. I'm really new in a lot of things, and I'm trying to continue my dad's legacy of doing what he did to start his, I guess, advocate for our area of San Antonio. I am he was born poor on the west side of San Antonio, off of Zazamora and West Martin. And my mom, our ancestry goes all the way back to the missions. I'm a 8th generation descendant of Pedro Huizar, the sculptor, surveyor, whatever you want to call him, from the Mission San Jose Rose Window. I'm also a Canary Island descendant from the original families that settled here and established the first governmental system here in San Antonio. So those of you who've seen the statues in front of the Bexar County Courthouse, I'm part of that group. I'm also Daughters of the Republic of Texas. So I'm really new in a lot of things, and one of the things that really concerns me is these opportunity zones, of which particularly Harlandale ISD has a lot of which I grew up and came out of, and moved back to my neighborhood of Bustillo Drive, which is named after my great-great-grandfather, who was granted land by the King of Spain. So anyway, my question is, let's, opportunity zones. Who do I need to talk to about that?
So I'm going to let him try, but I believe that's a federal issue.
Yeah, they're federal designations, and they're meant to attract investment, and so, but they're federal designation for tax purposes and stuff. There are other positives that you possibly can get from opportunity zones, but last session when we were getting rid of Chapter 313 incentives for corporations, they couldn't get the votes for the renewal until, so they had to come to Democrats, and so we added wage restrictions, minimum wage restrictions that are above the minimum wage. We added the fact that they needed to look at opportunity zones first so that we could attract high-paying jobs to these areas, and so that's what's going on. Yeah, so, well, yeah, no, I'm not saying that it's going to happen automatically.
No,
but
not even that. We got developers coming in just lining their pockets.
Oh,
I
yeah.
suggest we should call them revitalization zones.
Revitalization. Well, I will reach out to Congress and Congressman Castro, and then on the south side, which one's your congressman?
Gutierrez.
No. Gutierrez is your senator, Henry Cuellar.
Okay.
Yeah. So we'll reach out and we'll talk to him about that.
I would definitely like to be part of that conversation, if you don't mind.
Absolutely. We'll let him know.
You want to say your goodbyes?
So I was going to say, look, I'm not going to see anybody else to talk to. But my wife has a doctor's appointment with her rheumatologist, and he leaves town after her appointment, so we can't be late. Mark, you're going to get with Fernando and with the doctor, and then John Nisbet, you got his number. So we've got a group of attorneys that are volunteering to do pro bono work to help cure the title situation. For those of you who don't know, I've been in the title industry since 1998, and some of our attorneys are willing to volunteer to help people fix their chain of title situations.
And Senator, like your idea, it may not be needed legislative fix. It could be something else.
Yeah, we just need people at the city attorney's office to understand that there'll always be risk, and that they need to know what level of risk they can live with. You know, at the end of the day, it doesn't do any good for the citizens of San Antonio to pass a $100 million bond if you're not going to put that money into homes. The most affordable housing is like the most affordable water and power you can get. That's the one you don't use, the one you don't need, the one that you can, if you can continue to live in your home, that's the most affordable. And so we need to do everything we can to keep people in their homes. And so if that means tax policies, it means that people can afford to live in their home. We passed the bill to increase the homestead exemption from whatever it is to $140,000 for everybody. For seniors and disabled, it's going to be $150,000. So the first $150,000 for a senior or disabled person is off the books in terms of their school taxes, so that they can continue to afford to live in their home. We've got to do things so that people multi-generationally. Look, California, San Diego went through this when the property values went through the roof, where people could no longer afford the taxes and they felt like they were renting their home from the government. So tax policy and doing the right thing by people have to work together. And the way that we make that happen is that we first think about the homeowner, the residential at the lowest level, so that we can not have it to where people can't afford to own a home and to live in their home. Because what I don't want to have happen is, look, we all love the success the Pearl has been. What I don't like is that people who've done nothing living right around the Pearl start to feel like they can't afford to live in their own home. We cannot allow gentrification to push people out of their neighborhoods.
Thank you very much, Senator. I don't know if you want to give him a round of applause. He has to run. He has a tendency to give out his cards, but if he doesn't, I have his cell phone. So if you didn't have a question answered, feel free to give it to me later. And as he drops his mic and doesn't take it to the doctor's office, tip your waiter. Tip your waiter on your way out. All right. So thank you very much, Senator. I only call him that when he's being senatorial. Okay, that being said, now we can kind of start back from the beginning, and I am very proud to say we should have two guests coming on. All right, so I will start with the one we have here live, which is Dr. Adriana Rocha Garcia, a lifelong resident of San Antonio. Dr. Adriana Rocha Garcia was raised and continues to call Southwest San Antonio her home. She is passionate about organizations that help the most unrepresented populations in San Antonio. Throughout her career, she has held various administrative and consulting positions in communications, marketing at organizations like SAM Ministries, the Hispanic Chamber of Commerce, the City of San Antonio Southwest ISD, and Project Quest. She was elected to represent District 4. Since December of 2021, she has served as president of the San Antonio Housing Trust, San Antonio Housing Trust Foundation, the San Antonio Housing Trust Public Facility Corporation, the Finance Corporation. She is also chair of the Planning and Community Development Committee. So amongst everything that she's done.
MOC.
And MOC?
And MOC, Municipal Utilities.
And the Municipal Utilities Committee. It's almost like, what hasn't this woman done? She's actually one of my favorite people because as an academic, she does a lot of reading. And she does a lot of reading and a lot of thinking. And based on her roots, I think she thinks compassionately. And so she definitely marries the academic with the heart and the soul. So thank you very much for being here. And then, is he online? Do we see him? Yay! Okay, so we have a special treat. We actually have the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs on a federal level from the National Association of Housing and Redevelopment Officials. Eric helps coordinate all aspects of NARO's policy and advocacy work. He is also the staff liaison for the Community Development and Stabilization Committee. Along with his team, he provides member agencies with one-on-one technical assistance and policy guidance, and tracks and initiates policy action for the legislative and regulatory issues. Prior to this, Eric worked in research, helping to create projects and reports that focused on rural, affordable housing, senior housing, supportive housing. He received his bachelor's degree in geography and international development from the University of Washington and his master's degree in community and regional planning from the University of Columbia. Thank you, Eric. Can you hear us? Not well, but we will figure that out. And as we figure that out, as we figure out a way to hear you loudly in the room, I am going to go ahead and start with Councilwoman Rocha Garcia. So one of the things that I just wanted to ask you, earlier they talked about the bond, the housing bond. And between you and me, and I don't know if I've actually told you, I remember when that first came up, one of your previous colleagues and my previous boss said $250,000 or $250 for the bond. And someone told her, you'll never be able to use it. You won't be able to spend it. And somehow it suddenly became $150. It was like, wah, wah. So what are your thoughts, Councilwoman, especially someone who's running for a future office? Can we get a larger housing bond?
Yeah, I think we absolutely need it. I've been talking about the housing bond in terms of the decade of the neighborhood. And we shouldn't leave it, by the way, to a decade. It should be always about your neighborhoods. And so I do think that we have the opportunity, because of what we've done so far with the housing bond, because of the implementation, because of the guidance, obviously, of the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, that we can go to our voters and say, here's what we've done, here's where we've moved the needle, we need additional support, here's what we've learned, here's where we can improve, give us another shot at this, a second shot at this, and help us improve more lives by the way, adding more funds to the bond. So I do think that we need to go for a bigger bond. We actually talked about it at City Council a few weeks ago, and one of my colleagues said, we need a $1 billion bond for housing, right? And so while that was just kind of a general number that he threw out, I do think that we could incrementally increase and really use that. We also have to be really perceptive to the reality of the labor market out there, the financial market as well. And so even if we ask and we're able to get some additional, can we realistically complete the amount of projects that we've dedicated to within that 5-year period? And so, although yes, absolutely, we want to scale up, what is the right amount of money that we scale up to? But yes, to answer your question, we absolutely need some additional funding for the next go around.
Perfect, thank you so much. I'm starting to feel bad. I went straight in asking a question, didn't I?
That's okay.
So how about we take a step back and you share with us and everyone here anything that you'd like to essentially plans, future plans, present plans, and even the past that you would want to point out on when it comes to affordable housing.
Sure. When it comes to affordable housing, I'm grateful, and I see our CEO here of the San Antonio Housing Trust, Pete Alanis, and I see half the team was here earlier too. By the way, you're invited to a 2 p.m. San Antonio Housing Trust board meeting, so tune in. You can listen online, but looking forward to the discussion that happens there. Very proud that and I've been president for 3 years, and very proud that together we have created more than 7,000 affordable housing units just in that time alone. So we try as hard as we can to just pump them through, right? Absolutely. Look, we have great staff that do all of the back end work for us, present to us. We have different committees, a legislative committee. We have the finance committee as well that go through and ask all of the questions, and it comes to the housing, or it comes to our board, and then we make these really difficult, I would say, decisions to either support or say, you know what, this is not feasible. And we take into consideration the timeline, we take into consideration the landscape, we do an environmental scan essentially every time that we think of a project. But very fortunate to be able to say that we work very close in partnership. We have the Chief Housing Officer, Mark Carmona, as well, who joins us every meeting. But we were able to establish a board that's a little bit more inclusive. So we have community members on that board that represent different areas. We have a community member that represents veterans. We have a community member that represents people of different abilities. We're very grateful to have that position in particular because we're really working on how to make a model out of what we do at the Housing Trust to make sure that there's additional consideration for people that have different abilities. I'll give you the example that in San Antonio, 1 in every 7 persons has some sort of a disability. And in my district, for instance, it's 1 in 4. So you could see how in the districts in the southern section, it's more important to make sure that we have that access, that accessibility. And so that's what we've been doing in the past, just focusing on the inclusivity part. On the board, we have the CEO of the food bank as well, the intersection with health and food and wellness and housing, and health essentially starts in your home. That's the concept that we've kind of wrapped around as a board, and very just grateful that we're able to do the work. In the future, I hope to continue to advocate for housing. We need people who understand both sides of the equation. So we have a representative today, Deborah from NRP, and so we know that there's responsible builders out there. We have to work with them and make sure that they're able to help us as well with the financing section of it. So those are some of the plans for the future.
Fabulous. Thank you so much. And I was thinking that as you were talking, one of the pluses that we've done is that this council has done is truly bring people like Mark to help collaborate and bring us all together to come up with ideas and to create policy in a well thought out manner. So that being said, I don't know, are we ready to go? Okay. Let's introduce Eric. I also, as Eric's just talking, I know that you have played an integral part in NLC in DC, so maybe that can help. Eric?
Thanks for having me join. My name is Eric Oberdorfer. I am the Director of Policy and Legislative Affairs at NARO. And for those of you that aren't familiar with us, we are one of the oldest affordable housing associations out there. We represent about 26,000 different agency, corporate, and individual members. A lot of those members are public housing agencies and community development agencies across the country. So our members in total manage about 3 million homes for 8 million people across the country. We've got different chapters in states. I was actually just in Austin last week with our Texas NARO group. But we really focus on making sure that the federal rental assistance programs and federal community development programs are able to best serve the communities that they should be doing. And I'll say right now, just a couple of things that I'll mention kind of at the top, and then happy to take any questions that pop up. But I think it's safe to say that things are a little different in DC than what we've ever seen before. Every day seems to be something new that pops up, and we've really been working to figure out what our messaging is and what our focus is, knowing that we're seeing some, troubling things pop up around the programs that our members serve with, specifically public housing, Section 8, CDBG, home investments partnerships programs, all of those. I think specifically there are really two main things going on in Congress right now, and then things that are happening over on the administration side. The first thing I want to note is just right now, Congress really has its attention set on what's known as reconciliation. And essentially, without getting into the specifics of it, reconciliation is the vehicle that the majority Republican House and the majority Republican Senate view as being the best mechanism to get a lot of the policies that the current President Trump campaigned on during the election. There's something else, though, that's happening that I think is going to be really important and that I am a little worried is not getting enough attention, and that is the fact that we are currently operating under a continuing resolution. That means that the government is only funded through March 14th at this point. On March 14th, there are a couple of things that could happen. We could either see a fiscal year 25 bill passed that would continue to fund programs through September 30th. I think what we're hearing on the Hill right now is the likelihood of that is very small. There still is not even agreement from just the House Republicans and the House Senate Appropriations Committees on what the top line spending numbers should be. That puts them in a difficult position to actually get these bills drafted and passed. There's the potential for a short-term continuing resolution, which would keep funding levels at what they were in fiscal year 24 for a few more weeks. There's a little bit of a risk to that because on April 30th, due to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, there would be some mandatory cuts that would go into effect for all programs across the federal government. And then there's also the risk of a government shutdown, which would mean that there was no funding bill passed, and we kind of sit in this unknown territory. We've heard some rumblings about a potential full year CR coming out of the House. But again, right, one thing we always like to say is that especially for housing programs, and especially knowing how much costs have increased recently, level funding from the year before is technically a cut, right? You're not going to be able to house as many families. There's some real concern, especially on the Section 8 voucher side, where if level funding were to carry forward all the way through the end of fiscal year 25, you're looking at almost 286,000 families across the country that would lose their rental assistance. So that would have some obvious direct impacts to the folks that we serve with these programs. The other thing that I'll just touch on is what's happening over at the Department of Housing and Urban Development right now. And I know the senator mentioned this too, but there are a lot of actions right now specifically related to staffing and what the numbers of staff at the Department of Housing and Urban Development will look like moving forward. So we're hearing the Department of Government Efficiency, which is led by Elon Musk, is looking to cut about 50% of all HUD staff across the country. In the Office of Public and Indian Housing, that's 50% of everyone. The Office of Community Planning and Development, which gets grants like CDBG, homelessness assistance grants out the door, they're looking to cut up to 84% of the staff there. Policy Development and Research, which focuses on research, would look at cutting 75% of the staff, and then the Office of Housing about 40%. Those are drastic and dramatic cuts to staffing, and that will only make it more difficult to have federal programs work. There's a lot of institutional knowledge in the building that's going to be lost, and that's going to make it challenging. So I think March 14th is going to have a lot of answers for us. Again, that's when the continuing resolution expires. One concern we have is even whether or not funding will make it out the door. With the continuing resolution, I'm sure you are all familiar with the federal funding freeze that happened back in January, which really threw a lot of people for a loop and made it difficult to access funding that had already been appropriated by Congress. So I think really from our perspective right now, our huge focus is on making sure that not only folks on the Hill, but folks, through the media, through local elected officials, through your state representatives and senators understand how critical these programs are and really what the direct impact would be of some of the cuts that we're hearing about, not only at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, but specifically to the funding streams themselves, how dramatic and drastic that would be in impacting the communities that you all serve.
Thank you so much, Eric. If I didn't mention, Eric is actually coming from us direct from DC, reason why he's visiting us virtually. And he has touched on a couple of things that have us, some of us, sleepless at night, to say the least. I will say that moving forward, we here in San Antonio, the Chamber is hosting SA to DC next month. I think that collectively, those who will be attending, it would be fabulous if we took note of what Eric just said and within our meetings ensure that we are advocating for these things. There's also a couple of industry trips to DC in March. I don't know, I think it'll be after though the 14th, so that may not help. But that is something that collectively we need to do. There are agencies that are ready to write letters to your Congress, to your electeds, to your congressmen, to the White House, Eric, is there anything else we can do to help as a group?
Absolutely, and I'm happy to share a couple of resources after this that hopefully we can get out to everyone. But there are a couple of grassroots activities that we're doing here at NARO. One, we have what's known as an Action Alert Center. It's a really easy vehicle that allows you to just put your address in, and then it automatically populates a letter that you can send to both your senators as well as your representative, and even in this case to your governor, to make sure that they're aware at the state level. We also just released yesterday a 2-page sheet of talking points that you can use to call your members of Congress. Letters are really important, but sometimes calls can be even more effective because it's a lot harder for them to ignore those. And if you're in your representative's district, they have to make a note of the call itself. We'll be hosting our Hill Day in Washington, D.C., bringing our members in on March 12th. So it's right before the end of the continuing resolution, but it's important that we start doing this advocacy work now, because by the 12th, there could be things that are already decided. And what we want to make sure is our members of Congress understand what these challenges are. We've also got our legislative agenda up on our website that I can share that walks through a couple of our big policy priorities, but also has our funding recommendations. And that can just help also kind of craft your message when you're talking to your members of Congress here in DC.
Thank you so much. That is definitely something that we will share with the group who RSVP to this event. Also, here in San Antonio, we do have a collective. I'd say we've been working collaboratively for a couple years now. And I think as a group, we can definitely spread that throughout our industry. So real quick, we have about 10 minutes. I know this panel has been a little different than others, but that tends to define me too. That being said, any questions while we have Eric online, while we have the councilwoman here? And if you do, just run on up here. Go ahead.
Eric, hi, I'm Mark. I'm one of the chief housing officers in San Antonio. We are going to have a housing team that's now 36 people that will be in DC during that time. What recommendations would you have for us of visits that we need to set up that we haven't set up already, people that we need to go see? I just made a note to myself, we probably need to get some of your time while we're there, but who would you recommend that we're spending time with? And right now, it seems like our approach is around asking questions, gathering intel, trying to understand direction. But what other advice would you give us as we approach that trip?
I think what would be most impactful, especially as you're thinking about your meetings with your members of Congress, is to have as much data as you possibly can on both the benefits of federal programs to your communities, as well as what potential cuts could do. One thing we're working on that I forgot to mention that will be up on our website shortly are one-pagers that go into specific detail about each state. So we'd have a Texas one-pager that would talk about what the potential impacts of cuts to the Section 8 program would have on Texas itself. I think anything you can target like that is useful. Economic impact that you can show to your members of Congress is going to be great. And then the other thing, what we're really hearing, especially with some of the grant programs where funding is still frozen or grantees are not able to access, what is still remaining in their grant, is that there is a real benefit to putting pressure on your members of Congress in those meetings, because what we're seeing to be most effective right now, especially on the Republican side, is getting members of Congress to reach out and put pressure on the Department of Government Efficiency to start pushing stuff out. It's kind of a workaround in a way. I think there's a lot of concern on Capitol Hill for members of Congress right now, especially about potentially being primaried for the 2026 midterm elections. But I think the other thing to keep in mind in these meetings is that this is unprecedented for us. This is unprecedented for everyone. And making that case of what the direct consequences and impacts are going to be within your communities to those people's constituents, I think is going to be really critical.
Councilwoman, I wanted to ask you, you've also participated in DC in representing the city. Tell us a little, I think you've done, you're familiar with the Housing Supply Accelerator. Could you share with us a little more of that?
Yeah, absolutely. So I had the honor of chairing the Human Development Committee last year for the National League of Cities, and I co-chaired it the year before. And in that work that the National League of Cities is doing is we traveled all around the United States, and we were learning best practices on how we were increasing housing supply across the United States. We had different associations. The American Planning Association hosted, the Mortgage Banking Association. There's just several associations that hosted us essentially in different cities to learn about the best practices. The result was a housing supply toolkit accelerator, and that way you can learn about what other communities are doing. So for instance, in Detroit, there was a specific focus on duplexes, and the city invested in the most affordable housing stock, like the senator said, and reinvesting in that and making sure that those were brought up to code, etc. In Missoula, there was another effort that was also community driven. And so we get to see the best of everything. In Tacoma, Washington, there was this incredible facility where it was for some of our older adults. And at the center of it was essentially a built-in senior center with services. And so we got so many ideas because of that. So I wanted to make sure that I highlighted that work, because at the national level, that is the conversation. That was the priority of National League of Cities last year, was to focus on that. So I've gotten to work with mayors from across the United States. I've gotten to work with council members from across the United States, but more importantly also industry leaders that can actually tell us what is working, what they can and can't do. So we bring in the perspective from our communities, the need, the data that is out there, and then we work together with them to say, how do we get there? How do we make you be able to pencil this? How do we make it work for all of us? And so definitely that is something that has been critical as we go about the work. It will continue to be out there. So I encourage you to go and check it out. A lot of it has to do with some of the more boring stuff like land use policy, etc. And I'm saying that for all of my friends who are really into that. But it's very important is the point, right? And so what other cities are doing is going to be critical for us to learn from. Right now, we're operating almost on a continuity of operations, if you will. What is our plan B? What is our plan C? What happens if the funds do go away? So we're planning for that at the city level, but we're working under the time or the frame of mind that we're doing business as usual, but we're prepared. So we have something in mind. We've been working on it for several months in some cases, and so just grateful that our staff is able to learn from you all as well. But thank you so much, Teresa.
Well, fabulous. Thank you so much. Thank you both for being here. I think it's very important. I almost feel like I got the Debbie Downer of the organization of the committees today.
You did.
However, the reality is that I'm a firm believer of together we can do so much. And those who know me know that I have a tendency to hang out with other smart people and just kind of unpack policy and figure out how to fix it, because I like puzzles, I guess. But we're going to encourage you, and I'm going to use this as a shameless plug, to say that we are going to start doing a Housing Power Hour. So at the end of every month at Opportunity Home, have the opportunity for all of us to get together and unpack a subject, right? Those who know it can come and share. Those who don't can learn it. But the reality is that together, knowledge, data can help us continue to move the needle. So please help me thank Councilwoman Rocha Garcia, of course, Eric, all the way from DC with more of the down reality. And however, I'm not going to end it on a down note. Eric, I think you've given us marching orders for our trip coming up to DC. And know that it's not a free trip. We are there. It's not a fun trip. We are not going out there to freeze ourselves. We are out there to fight. And we're out there to fight for affordable housing. So thank you both so much, and thank all of you guys for coming.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, folks. It's great to be here. I like Ayanna just said, I'm the real estate and finance reporter for the San Antonio Business Journal. So I think I've spoken to everybody, or I'm familiar with everybody on the panel because, between commercial real estate development, how to finance it, the interest rate hikes in 2022, these are all kind of salient topics that are important to everybody in the industry right now, and I think that's where a lot of this conversation is going to live, is how projects get funded and how preservation efforts get funded. Basically, how do we put more housing on the ground and keep the housing that we have and keep it, looking nice and shiny and bright and all of that sort of thing. So here to talk about that with us is Tim Alcott, who is EVP with Opportunity Home. So please, a round of applause for Tim. Yeah. Summer Greathouse, formerly commissioner, who is a partner at Bracewell. So give it up for Summer as well, please. And finally, Pete Alaniz, who is executive director of the San Antonio Housing Trust. One time for Pete. Yeah. So the way that I want to get it started is just by asking you all what your goals are, what your organizations do for affordable housing in San Antonio, just as kind of an introduction to what it is that you do. Tim.
Yeah, so what I do personally, I oversee the real estate department, and our goal is to figure out how to get more units on the ground. And it's very difficult right now with interest rates, construction costs, insurance costs, and so how do we do it with limited federal funding? And we're very thankful for the city and all the gap financings they provide, but it's very, very hard to figure out how to get these things financed. So our goal is how can we build more units for the very low income folks of San Antonio.
And you can pass it on.
Hey everyone, so I'm a lawyer, I'm a partner at Bracewell. I represent the public partners and public-private partnerships for affordable housing. We mostly focus on the financing part of that, helping kind of structure the deals and making sure that we can get them across the finish line. And so while you wouldn't think of a law firm as contributing to the production of affordable housing, my group actually represents folks across the state. So I have the opportunity to work both with Tim and with Pete here in San Antonio, but also across the state. So what we do is we try to share best practices between communities, make sure that if there's something that's working in one community, we're talking to folks in other communities where we represent those partners as well. And then also tracking legislation. So right now, obviously, we're tracking what's going on at the state level, making sure that the bills that are being advanced, that the folks who are voting on those are educated and understand what the repercussions of those bills are, and then also at the federal level as well.
Thank you. Again, my name is Pete Alaniz. I'm the Executive Director for the San Antonio Housing Trust, and who we are and what we are. First, we're not the San Antonio Housing Authority, right? A name we always get confused with. We are the San Antonio Housing Trust. We are a City San Antonio created nonprofit entity whose purpose is to create and preserve housing that's affordable, sustainable, and empowers neighborhoods and helps build communities around San Antonio. So San Antonio is the area that we work with. We don't work out of state or in the county areas or the ETJs. We specifically work within the city of San Antonio. And typically we partner with both for-profit and nonprofit developers to help facilitate the creation and preservation of housing through our property tax exemption and our private activity bond issuance powers to create some tax exempt debt that are required for many of the structures through like the LIHTC program, which is low income housing tax credit program. For many of y'all who don't know the acronyms, I'll try to avoid acronyms. But essentially for that partnership, we're able to negotiate reduced or below market rents. They're usually rent and income restricted at various income levels. We also get a financial return that comes back to the Housing Trust, which then we redeploy into other opportunities that typically aren't bankable, right? When we're looking at opportunities for permanent supportive housing, we provided $1 million contribution to the Commons of the Sakia project this past year. We're actually taking to the board this afternoon a recommendation for about $2 million in funding for various rehabs of different nonprofit communities throughout San Antonio. And we're also very active in land acquisition. We have a land acquisition strategy that we're being very aggressive with, and we're looking to make some key acquisitions here in the very near future. So that is kind of a sense of what we do, and happy to participate on this panel.
And then this is going to go right back to Pete, but since you interface so often with both the private sector and the public sector, what has the landscape been like over the last couple of years for affordable housing development with both public and private partners?
Sure. I think we've seen the increased need for public partners like the Housing Trust and like Opportunity Home San Antonio. They have essentially equivalent powers that we do as well. And so I think we've seen a really big uptick in the number of private entities needing to partner with us to just make their projects work, right? And that's grown over the last decade. This is not a power that's new. We've had it for quite some time, but we've seen a very large uptick in the need because costs have increased, operating expenses have increased, interest rates, even during the construction process, skyrocketed. A few years ago, we were dealing with that issue. And then the cost of permanent financing is just, you never know what it's going to be and 2 years down the line when you've built and stabilized your property. So there are a lot of unknowns and uncertainty when it comes to building housing, whether it's affordable or market rate. The affordability portion just adds another complexity to the financing, and that's where we come in and try to help with our powers and what we do. So say a lot more uptick in activity.
Tim, would you like to go as well?
Sure. Yeah. So we have, if you look at the TDHCA's website, they list a number of bond applications, and the number has gone down. So if you look at 2-3 years ago, the number of applications for bonds was, I can say double. I don't know if y'all know the number, but lately there's just been such gaps for the construction and closing deals that before, when you went in for the lottery, you may not be reached. But last year, nearly everyone was reached, and I can be corrected by Summer, but probably everybody was reached in the bond application before. You waited for the lottery ball, would you actually get funded? Now, because the gaps are so high, it's very hard to get deals done. And that's a challenge for the city of San Antonio because we have such an affordable housing need. We have tons of folks on our wait list at San Antonio Housing Authority or Opportunity Home San Antonio. And we got to figure out how do we help our developers, be able to build with us as partners.
It's just as an illustrative example, it's kind of that thing where you've almost reached the person as you're falling off the cliff, but you don't quite make it.
Exactly.
So I'd like to I want to ask about and this question will go to Summer first because I'd like to ask about policies. The previous panel spoke about policies at the federal level. I'd like to talk about policies at the federal level, and then anything else you think is the most pertinent to what is affecting communities' ability to finance affordable housing projects here. So maybe start at the federal level. I know we talked about the state level. Maybe talk about those, please, Summer.
Sure. I think obviously right now there's a lot of uncertainty as to what the future holds, and I think that is that's also affecting how our deals are getting financed, right? Because our partners are unsure of what the future holds and how they're going to have to react. The Commons at Asaikio was a wild ride at the end. There's a great article that came out in the San Antonio Report if you guys want to read about that. But in terms of legislation that we're hearing about and policies that we're hearing that are being forwarded by both federal and state level. So obviously tax exempt bonds are a super important piece of financing for affordable housing. The 4% low-income housing tax credit program requires that 50% of the cost of a project be financed with tax exempt bonds. So if we take that tool away, which has been proposed at the federal level, then how are we going to get a 4% deal across the finish line? And we did a lot of 4% deals this last year. We probably, in San Antonio, don't know the number of units, but it was well into the thousands. So that's a big issue, I think, at the federal level is the tax exempt bonds, and certainly something we're going to talk about at SA to DC. At the state level, we're also seeing that the governor has put forward some emergency items that just came out actually this morning, that in terms of bond elections, so that would be our housing bond here in San Antonio that we passed, $150 million bond. If we want to do another one, they are attempting to restrict the ways in which we can hold bond elections. So only being able to hold the bond election in November instead of also being able to do it in May, that's currently the law, is that it can be held in May as well. So that has long-reaching effects of how these bonds are financed and how they're able to be sold in the market. So it's going to decrease the city's ability to find, once they have the ability to sell the bonds, to actually sell the bonds in the market and get that money. Additionally, one of the other things is requiring a 2/3 majority instead of a simple majority to pass a bond. So there are a lot of things that are going on right now, both federal and state level, that we're needing to track, because those are super important tools that if we don't have the ability to fill the gaps when the interest rates are high, the construction costs are high, the projects won't get done. It's the end of the day. The money is not there, the project's not going to happen.
Please.
I'm going to talk.
Yeah, if I could follow up on that, both on the federal and state actions. Federally, we've seen what DOGE is doing with cutting not only workforce, in efforts to be more efficient. We all want a more efficient government, but we're cutting off an arm essentially, saying this is going to help you in the long run. It's like, well, how is that going to help you in the long run? So as we're seeing these cuts on the federal level, and I definitely expect to see major impacts to programs like the Community Development Block Grant Program, the Home Investment Partnership Program, where the City of San Antonio receives funding from the federal government each year to reinvest back into our communities. If programs like that go away, then the burden to continue working with community development then falls to a state and to a local level. What we're just seeing now at the state level, just with what just came out right now, making it harder for localities to then pass some sort of bond election, would absolutely create an additional barrier to where we locally, if we decide we want to carry the financial burden on investing in our community because the federal government hasn't been able to, well, that's going to limit that too, right? So how then are we supposed to continue working with community development programs and achieving typically what is not bankable in many cases that the market just typically cannot reach? What's going to happen then? And so I'm very concerned about what the next 2 to 4 years are going to look like in terms of being able for us to help ourselves, right? What's going to happen in 2027 if we're not able to pass a housing bond? Because we got 65% of the vote, and which sounds great, but this requirement comes in, says, sorry, you need 67 to pass. What are we supposed to do? So I think those really need to be taken a look at. I think folks need to really contact your representatives at the state level. Something like this could absolutely really hurt San Antonio, and not just on housing bond stuff, but on infrastructure needs. Anything else that our local housing bond pays for is at risk, right?
And I'll just add that's any infrastructure. That's bonds, period. So the bonds, to repair sidewalks and build the airport and the stadiums and all of the things that we enjoy as a community that are community spaces, parks, all of those. Hospitals. That's a great one. Thank you. Schools. All the things that we need as a community. So it's really important for us to be advocating for that. I forgot about adding in the tax exemption, the property tax exemption. That's a huge way that both Tim and Pete's organizations can participate in these deals, because property taxes are approximately 50% of operating costs for all multifamily projects. So if you can remove that cost burden for an affordable housing project, again, that's a really important key to getting that across the line. And of course, we've seen a lot of bills filed at the state level that could affect the ability of those organizations to continue providing that property tax exemption.
And I think it's interesting that you bring that up, because I know that Pete and I have spoken about this, I believe, once before during the 88th legislative session when some legislation had been passed regarding PFCs. And I know now we're hearing a little bit of, I'm not going to go so far as to call it malfeasance. I think it's sort of loopholing of HFCs and PFCs and their mechanisms. I think it's particularly that one locality's ability to remove properties off the tax rolls of other communities. Is there any concern with regards to how that will affect organizations like Opportunity Home or the Housing Trust?
Yeah, it does impact us both. Pete and I, we both do partnerships with for-profit developers, and our terms are very similar. But what we've seen is, I think there's 11 in San Antonio, it's about $500 million, are traveling HFCs that have come in, and they're from Pecos or from south of San Antonio, Maverick County, and their terms are typically better for the developer than what we provide.
Yeah.
And the challenge is, they don't have any investment locally, so they'll come in, oftentimes they're a naturally affordable apartment complex. In other words, it's already folks that are below 80% AMI, and so they're not providing any new affordability, but they take it off the tax rolls. But yet the city of San Antonio is stuck with paying for the schools, the teachers, the infrastructure, and housing the folks. But all the money, and these are long-term ground leases, they could be 75 years, and they get a percentage of the, quote, tax savings is still going to Pecos or whatever the entity is for a long time. And so we were up there yesterday speaking to legislative folks, and I think it's pretty universal that we're all against these walking or traveling HFCs. So I'm positive the law will change relating to that. One of the suggestions we're having is that if they already have that exemption in place for a long period of time, that the funds be transferred from a traveling HFC going forward to a local HFC. So for the next 75 years, it's not going out of the county. You would either go, Pete has an HFC, I have an HFC. It's actually not self-serving. It can go to the city for all I care. Doesn't matter. I just want to keep the money local.
Yeah.
Yep.
Absolutely. And I think, please go ahead.
We'll all talk about this. That's a big issue. So I just want to clarify. So the 11 or 12, I think it's 11 or 12 deals that have been done with traveling HFCs, that's since November of 2024. It is $12.5 million of tax revenue to the city, the county, the schools that was exempted, and those are projects that are already existing and already affordable. So they're done under the guise of this is preservation of affordable housing, but there's no requirement for any rehabilitation, and there's no actual guidelines in the law that really protect the tenants that are there. The PFC legislation that you mentioned earlier, that we all worked on 2 years ago, actually put into effect real guidelines to help tenant protections, that those projects have to accept Section 8 vouchers. They can't just kick tenants out for no reason. Actual levels of affordability that were deeper and requirements for rehabilitation if it's an existing project. So we're looking to the HFC bills that are being filed this year to hopefully put into place similar requirements and to keep the traveling HFCs out and to make sure that there's actual affordability put into these projects. But we also have to make sure that there's not unintended consequences, because the legislators get lobbied, for lack of a better word, by certain groups, and they might be groups that have really good intentions, but they don't understand the long-term effects, and that's why it's so important for folks like Tim and for Pete to carry the message on what actually happens in these deals, and our development community, Deborah's over there, she's working really hard on this as well, to make sure that it doesn't just sound good on paper, but it actually works for the community.
In the reception that we got when we were in Austin, I think it was yesterday.
2 days ago.
2 days ago, thank you. They're all melding into each other, but 2 days ago we went to Austin. We weren't just talking with Democratic legislators, we were talking with Republican legislators as well. They all agreed that this was BS, right? Now, I'm going to be very kind in that. I really want to say the word. But to go into another community, another county, I gave him the example. I said, would you want me coming into your county and taking something off the tax rolls with no permission, no transparency, no accountability, and by the way, I receive all the benefit from your deal in your community, right? And they said, yeah, we don't want that. I said, great, you need to pass this piece of legislation, right? And it made total sense. I think what we do at the Housing Trust, I know our partners up here do this, and Summer is the one that's really in the weeds in our documents negotiating some of these things. We are trying to maximize the community benefit. A tax exemption is incredibly valuable, right? And so what we do is we measure what that tax exemption is over a period of time, and we look at the value that we're getting in reduction in rents, right, over that certain period of time, as well as the financial return that comes back to our entities because we get to deploy that out.
Yeah.
So it's not a financial return that we're looking for, it's an overall community return. And that's how we measure whether or not to move something forward. Those other communities that are doing with the traveling HFCs, we don't know what sort of community benefit analysis that they're doing. We don't know what sort of deals that they've negotiated or what sort of financial and community returns that are coming back outside the community. We have policy goals. We're in line with the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, and our efforts are all aligned here. We're doing what we can locally on these deals to make sure we maximize that return. These traveling HFCs are likely not doing any of that.
Well, it's very simple. You just watch every board meeting of every HFC in the state of Texas.
HFCs currently are not governed by the Open Meetings Act.
That's right.
So you can't, in many cases,
right.
because they go behind closed doors to make all their decisions. The public information, yes. Open meetings, no. That's another change that we're tracking in the legislature.
Look, I'm a reporter. That's like if I was a vampire, that is my garlic. Is no Open Meetings Act. People who are not subject to the Open Meetings Act. Executive sessions. But okay, so something that I want to touch on is we talked about, we've done a great job of sort of talking very theoretically about financing obstacles and all of this sort of thing. I want to know, because you guys are both, Tim and Pete, sorry, are very boots on the ground with regards to, there are people who live in the buildings that you guys build. So what happens when, I've spoken to Opportunity Home before after the moratorium on evictions was lifted after the pandemic, and the number of people who had needed affordable housing had skyrocketed. So when we have those kinds of barriers and then mount more barriers on top of barriers to affordable housing, what are the needs that both of you have seen on the ground when it comes to the people who need to be in those properties, and then what are their alternatives?
They need a lot. So we actually have a fund at Opportunity Home, and it's for rental assistance. So people are behind on the rents. That we work with them on payment plans and things of that nature. We also provide job training. And that's just required on all of our tax credit deals. But we actually have a CDI department that actually helps with job training, community engagement, assisting with whatever impediments they have for moving on, living in our housing, but also having other opportunities. But Pete, do you have something more specific on that?
Yeah, likewise, we've established what's called a Tenant Emergency Assistance Matters Program. So when we negotiate the deals with our development partners, we pre-fund about $1,500 per unit per year for at least 10 years. A capital fund that will be used for emergency assistance for the tenants at that specific property. So to date, we have about $4 million that we've committed to over the next 10 years to directly fund emergency assistance at our properties. Some of the other things is the Ready Work San Antonio program, right? And making sure that our partners have access, our Ready to Work partners have access to come to our communities and talk with the folks that are there if they need to go through that Ready to Work program. It's an opportunity to upskill their training, to get some additional services, and hopefully upskill to get better jobs later on down the line. So it's a great partnership with the City of San Antonio on SA Ready to Work. I think the big thing about evictions is once you get that eviction, it's very difficult to find housing elsewhere. We have a tenant protection policy that puts some guardrails regarding applicant selection and things of that nature, and that's specific to the San Antonio Housing Trust. So we're trying to do what we can to make sure that tenants are really well representative, but also being fair to the landlord population that we work with, to make sure that they're being good actors, and that we're all working together to make sure that we have the best outcomes for our tenants.
That's fantastic. To sort of take a little bit more of a macro view on this for the audience that is here, I think what is remarkable about all of your jobs is that there are so many different pieces that you have to put together to make a project work. I mean, commercial real estate financing is complicated at the best of times. I think what everybody here does is infinitely more complicated, and I hope that people appreciate the depth to which you need to be familiar with policies and what you can do, what you can't do, all in the name of bettering your community, which I think is sort of that end goal for everybody here. I'd like to change tack a little bit, and I know we're talking a lot about rental housing. I also exist a lot in the single-family housing space, and I think maybe I'll toss this to Summer first because of your experience on the Zoning Commission and with policy in general. Let's talk about densification. Is this something that the city of San Antonio needs? Are there benefits to it? I know that inside Loop 410 we're getting increasingly landlocked. So what does that part of it look like? And then maybe I'd like Pete also to talk about where you guys are banking land for future developments, and if it is inside Loop 410 or what that piece of it looks like.
Make me spill beans.
So, yeah, I think San Antonio is not a very dense city. We are probably one of the least dense large cities in the U.S., especially in the downtown area, right? There's not a lot of residential development in downtown San Antonio, and I think we have a huge opportunity to increase that. And I think, the zoning in downtown is amenable to that. There's a lot of other issues that we have to deal with there. But in terms of density, I think things that I would like to see here in San Antonio is a better density bonus program. I think that's something that we have not been able to leverage the way that some other communities have. And like I said earlier, I have the privilege of working mostly in San Antonio, and I think we have a lot of things that we've done right. A lot. I constantly am singing the praises of how awesome this city is and how great our housing community is here and how well everybody works together. And I think someone said that earlier. That does not happen in most other cities. But I will say that we are seeing in Dallas and Austin, their density bonus program has actually gotten some real legs. And Austin, I believe, is set to deliver the most affordable units of any city in the U.S., I think this year. It's either last year or this year. So that's something that I think that we could do. But I think the places where we've really gotten a W, the ADU, accessory dwelling unit, amendment to the UDC that was passed a couple years ago, as well as TOD, transit-oriented development, and the adoption of that going forward. I know that there are neighborhoods that are actually working actively to adopt their own policies as well and to support that, kind of contrary to the NIMBY, like the YIMBYs. So we do have some neighborhoods that are actively working to do that as well, which I think is a huge win for the community also.
Yeah, in that vein, I think TOD is very important, and we made some great strides, ADUs, et cetera. I think on the forefront is going to be missing middle typology housing. And when I talk about missing middle typology housing, I'm not talking about essentially just duplexes, right? I mean, we have in San Antonio either single-family homes or we have large-scale apartment complexes, very little in between. As you just mentioned, we're landlocked within 410. There is not a lot of 12, 14-acre sites around. So we have to start looking at how we better develop infill housing sites, right? There are a lot of half-acre to 1-acre sites that are strategically placed around San Antonio that have not been appropriately developed. But there are some challenges there. I'm part of the Housing Commission's Removing Barriers Subcommittee, which is actually going to start taking a look at missing middle typologies, items related to UDC amendments that may need to be recommended, to really start removing some of the barriers for folks to start being able to build on that half-acre, 1 acre type of land, because there is an opportunity there. We're seeing a larger overall flight, right, from the community's inner core. We see that reflected like with SAISD and the school closures that we're seeing that are happening. And how do we then continue to reinvest in our city's inner core, bring back population and density to our city's inner core? These are one of the, I got distracted by my flag saying, shut up. But these are one of the opportunities that we have, is to look at these smaller parcel pieces of land.
I can add on one thing to that really quickly. Yeah, so through Lorraine Robles' department, we actually have a home ownership program. And so we actually have homes that are being built. We have, we build 5 at a time. We have 3 under contract right now, and 2 that are for sale. We got another 5 that are just starting under construction. And we provide rental down payment assistance, and it's for people that are 50 to 80% AMI. And I noticed that we have this great brochure put out by Allison's department over here that tells you what 50 to 80% AMI is and who that is. But it's workforce housing, so people have an opportunity to live in a home. And with the city's down payment assistance and ours, you know, that we see people, we had one recently, they got $40,000 in down payment assistance. The typical is probably around 20. And you know, they actually can live in a house, and their mortgage payments are right around $1,500 a month. And so it makes it, you know, it is possible to live and have your own home as well.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I do want to give people an opportunity to ask some questions of our tremendous panelists who are up here. But I want to ask Tim one final question, which is that when we look at San Antonio's deep housing affordability needs, what do those look like, and what's being done to meet people who really critically need, you know, your 60%, 40% AMI type, since you brought up AMI, type properties?
Yeah, so, you know, Michael Reyes, who's the new CEO, he said, Tim, how are we going to support the folks on our wait list? And unfortunately, on our wait list is that a lot of folks are 0 to 15% AMI, so it's a much lower level. And so as you're building tax credit housing, they can't afford a tax credit unit, because that's assuming that you're making 30% of the AMI. So how are we going to redo that? And we have very aged, very old public housing developments. And so we have Lincoln, we have Castellano. How are we going to redevelop those? And so, you know, we pull back the toolbox, so to speak, pull back the sheets, I guess, and open the toolbox. Wrong, get my analogies, but the you know, we're looking at RAD, and that's a rental assistance administration program, and you know, we've looked at redeveloping our old public housing developments, and looking at buying apartment complex to potentially move families if they would like to. Or they can live in place, because everyone can stay, or you can get a voucher. But also, we can layer public housing leases on there as well, so that they still have the same tenant protections that they had before. So we're trying to figure all that out. But you know, we hope to figure out how actually to support those folks. We also are being rated by the S&P 500, so we can issue debt at a much lower rate. Okay. So it's 7.5%. We were quoted about 3.9%. And all of a sudden, you start pulling all these different levers, we can figure out how to build housing for a group that very few people, or almost nobody, is providing housing for. It's the biggest challenge.
And just so we do touch on that subject of preserving the affordable housing that we do have, is it just about as expensive to maintain older homes as it is to develop new ones?
If you rehabilitate, if you have a brand new house, your cost should be lower, because whenever we build, these single family homes are very energy efficient. Your utility bill is quite low on these single family homes. We're seeing utility bills around $60 a month. And the reason is because we build San Antonio Green Level 2, I believe. And so our goal is actually to reduce our energy bills. We actually built an apartment complex. It's a learning experience, but we actually built a BSAG Level 2, built San Antonio Green Level 2, and we had folks not turning on their air conditioning during the summertime. So that's how energy efficient the building was. So we hope to build them better.
Fantastic. I will open up the floor to some Q&A for folks. If anybody'd like to ask some questions, now is your. If anybody has some really complex policy questions, these are the people to ask. I know I'm putting you guys on the spot. I apologize for that. Yes.
I have a question, Pete, I guess maybe starting with you, but adaptive reuse. I know recently the Housing Trust is doing that, and I was talking with Tom Roth from the Housing Trust the other day, and I'm intrigued by this idea of existing infrastructure that could be turned and used into affordable housing. I'm wondering, how do we finance those kinds of deals, and what opportunity may exist here locally?
Thank you for the question. I think acquisition conversion from a use that was not housing into housing is something that have started to do. Our first project is with a developer out in New York called Good Homes San Antonio. That's the name of the project. It's actually over near the northwest side, right next to a VA polytrauma center. It is a former assisted living facility with memory care units. And that business went under due to COVID. And so the developer saw this project as an opportunity. They reached out to us. We've had great conversations with the VA. Hopefully the folks at the VA are still there when we meet with them next month. But they were very excited about the opportunity to work with us to figure out a way to create 112 new ADA accessible units, both 1 and 2 bedrooms, at a very low cost. This is about a $10 million project where we have an equivalent project of that size if it were new construction would probably be somewhere about 30 million or more, right? So the funding source for that is private equity and debt, but because of the population we're serving and the VA has been great at wanting to commit some vouchers to the project, we were able to get some debt that is going to be able to be paid off. So that is an example of a partnership that is going to provide a substantial number of accessible units, and it's really going to be geared towards veterans right close to medical center where they really need it the most, right? So that's one that we're pretty proud of. It's in construction now. We hope to get a ribbon cutting before the election, right? But we also have another project that Good Homes has identified. It's a Studio 6 motel, and actually we're going to be bringing this to our board here in about 2 hours to consider that partnership as well. So it's converting Studio 6 apartments. They're all 1 bedrooms, and it's really going to be workforce housing, for folks that need housing in that area. So it is something that's viable, and it's something that we're looking into. I don't think every opportunity out there is convertible. If you do some sort of office tower, maybe, but it all depends on where it's at, right? And what the amenities are to be able to support the residents who will be living there in the future.
Yeah, you stole my thunder. I was going to talk about office to residential conversion, but there are a lot of challenges with that, and I know we've looked at some projects that have come through that have been not quite on par with new construction, but pretty close. And so it's really, in that instance, measuring what's the public benefit of investing that much money into a deal. Maybe it's location, maybe there's, like Pete said, other amenities and things, but we are seeing office to residential conversion across the state kind of picking up as folks are not going into the office as much as they used to in the post-pandemic world.
I'm still curious about how much that Tower Life conversion is going to cost. Please.
Me too.
Hi, I'm Rene Gonzalez. I'm the General Manager for the Esperanza Community Land Trust, and I just wanted to address the answer that Tim gave. I don't think he completely answered the question. I think when you're comparing new construction with rehabbing, there's a lot more evidence out there that shows that, as Senator Menendez said, the cheapest house is the one you're living in now. There's a lot of houses that could be rehabilitated at much lower cost. Obviously, and it's a good point, the energy consumption on those older houses, especially on the historic west side and some of the south side, they're not really energy efficient, but there are methods, there are ways of rehabbing these houses and building or rehabilitating them to increase the energy level. So the community land trust model is one that's been adopted across the country. It does work for a lot of the existing homes, obviously not all of them, but thank you for your point about
I agree with you.
energy,
Yeah,
because
yeah.
on the historic west side, the heat issues in the summer are always a problem, like in other neighborhoods, and when you have wood frame houses without insulation, that becomes a big problem. But there are ways of funding rehab that'll work.
I agree with that too.
Fantastic. Well, it's like I said, folks, a lot of different small pieces that all kind of fit together to create affordable housing in San Antonio. I would like everybody to join me in thanking our panelists here today. Tim Alcott, Summer Gray, Thank you, folks, for joining us on this panel today. I will turn it back over to Ayana.
Good afternoon, everyone. I hope you have enjoyed your day. As Ayana mentioned, this is our last session. And today's event is to emphasize the importance of affordable housing for everyone, regardless of their individual circumstances. Whether you're a renter, homeowner, or part of a multi-generational household, having a safe, quality place to live that meets your needs and budget is a fundamental right. The demand for affordable housing has never been greater. In fact, with the current economic climate, we can expect this need to grow exponentially. We must work together to address this critical issue and ensure that everyone has access to stable and affordable housing. This session will set us down the path for the future of affordable housing, projects, programs, and initiatives. The panel will provide their insights regarding the various intersections where housing meets other systems such as healthcare, childcare, education, transportation, workforce, zoning and land use policies, legal title, property taxes, and co-compliance, just to name a few. By understanding the intersections between affordable housing and these other systems, we can develop more effective and comprehensive solutions to ensure that everyone has access to safe, stable, and affordable housing. So allow me to introduce our panel. And this is your opportunity, because we have a wonderful brain trust here. First, Leila Powell. Leila, a San Antonio native, current Executive Director for Local Initiative Support Corporation, also known as LIST San Antonio, boasts a wealth of experience in community development, having worked across diverse sectors, including financial institutions, nonprofit organizations, and government agencies. Her extensive involvement in the community is further exemplified by her service on numerous boards, including ours, showcasing her commitment to local initiatives and causes. Leila's educational background is equally impressive, holding a master's degree in community and regional planning, which has equipped her with the expertise to strategically address urban and regional challenges. Her undergraduate studies at Stanford University provide her with a solid foundation in critical thinking and problem solving, further enhancing her ability to contribute meaningfully to community development endeavors. Thank you for joining us, Leila. That was a lot. That's a lot.
That's a lot. I didn't write that. I just want everybody to know that I did not write that.
You are quite accomplished. Next is Dr. Roger Enriquez. He's an associate professor of criminology and criminal justice with a deep and abiding interest in a wide range of legal and social issues. His research delves into critical areas such as jury behavior and decision-making, the complexities of criminal law and immigration law, and the multifaceted policy issues affecting the Latino community. Furthermore, Dr. Enriquez has established himself as a leading the voice on the subject of digital equity, recognizing the crucial role that the internet access plays and technology literacy play in modern society. His commitment to social justice extends beyond the confines of academia. He has actively collaborated with organizations such as the Westside Community Partnerships, working to address the pressing needs of underserved residents, including affordable housing and equitable internet access. Welcome, Dr. Enriquez. Next is John Tiemann. John Tiemann is a seasoned professional with extensive experience in public involvement in education, currently serving as the Director of Strategy and Special Project at Via Metropolitan Transit, and a lecturer in urban and regional economic development at the University of Texas at San Antonio. John oversees a comprehensive 5-week program designed to equip students with essential knowledge in urban economic growth. Previous roles include Senior Public Involvement Specialist at Posnequi Camarillo and Manager of Public Involvement at Via Metropolitan Transit. John has also held positions such as Public Involvement Task Leader at RJ Riviera Associates Inc. and Policy and Zoning Aide for the City of San Antonio. Welcome. Last but not least, Mark Carmona. Mark, the Chief Housing Officer for the City of San Antonio, is a seasoned and accomplished leader with extensive experience in both the housing and behavioral health sectors. He is responsible for spearheading and overseeing the city's comprehensive strategy, housing implementation plan, also known as SHIP, to address the critical issues of housing affordability and homelessness. His leadership in this role is instrumental in shaping policies and programs that aim to ensure equitable access to safe, affordable housing for all residents of San Antonio, while also providing essential support services for those experiencing homelessness and behavioral health challenges. So welcome, Mark, as well.
Thank you.
So we're going to kick this off by having each of the panel members define and describe the systems in which they work and how they intersect with affordable housing. And so I'm going to start with Leila.
Thank you very much, Lorraine, and it's really a pleasure to be here with this very distinguished panel and this crowd in this room. I think the unique thing about LISC and where we're actually positioned here locally, and LISC is one of 38 offices that we as a national organization have across the country, but each local office is responding to local conditions. And for us, what we noted about 7 or 8 years ago when discussions began about creating the LISC office was that there's great work going on in many of the different areas that we've touched on already, transportation, affordable housing, homelessness response, but that the linkages between those different systems, and I'm sure everyone in this room has said this at one point, it seems like our work is so siloed. Well, that's a symptom of the lack of linkage between and among systems. And so what we focused on at LISC is figuring out how we can support groups that are already doing great work. We're the support organization, not necessarily the doer organization, into combining and integrating their efforts. So that if you are focusing on small business economic development, you're also focusing on financial education. You're also focusing on transportation and urban design issues because you need to be in an environment where people can access your goods and services. On the housing side, for example, we know that in San Antonio, there are actually families that spend more on transportation than they do on housing. So while you could say there's a housing crisis, you could also say, well, there's a transportation crisis. And I think that the difference in what we're trying to do is to get away from that kind of linear thinking where we solve one problem at a time, and usually that's someone else's fault that something's not working. And we look at how do we collaborate as organizations and groups in order to address what sometimes are intentional outcomes of a system. So we can talk about heirs property issues as a system where some of it is a feature, not a bug. But how you bring folks to the table, and there are policy issues with that, but there are also personality and political issues with that, because frankly human beings like to get credit for things, and they like to be recognized for their accomplishments, and it's a lot harder to recognize and give people those kudos sometimes when you're doing systems work. So that's the kind of role that LISC tries to play, almost like the lubricant between things and bringing folks together.
How about Dr.?
Oh.
You're on.
Well, first of all, I too want to thank Opportunity Home for putting on this event and also the distinguished panel. I think we don't have opportunities to kind of interact in this way, and so the idea that you're taking your time and some of your treasure to put together an opportunity for this is certainly very welcome, and also want to thank the university for assisting with putting the space together as well. So I think as Leila pointed out, it's really important to make sure that, to stress that a comprehensive solution, as opposed to just a problem-solving solution, is something that requires a great deal of thought and a great deal of discipline and intentionality. Since 2018, together with the Mexican American Unity Council, we've been able to facilitate the resolution of titles issues for over 400 families in some of San Antonio's most vulnerable communities. Simultaneously, we assisted an additional 400 households in developing an estate plan through things like transfer on death deeds, designed to really preserve the social cultural fabric of the neighborhoods by enabling original residents to remain in their homes. Now, a systems approach to this reveals some intricate nature of the housing markets and underscores the necessity for integrated solutions that encompass economic, social, and even political dimensions. I think it takes a little bit of time to sort of take a step back and look at the root causes of some of these problems, and then from there you can sort of figure out the interconnectedness of those problems. For example, with the title issue, it often stems from inadequate estate planning, familial disputes, complex inheritance laws, and those challenges frequently lead to things like deferred maintenance on properties, because again, if everybody owns the home, well, nobody really owns it. So no one wants to fix it, no one wants to maintain it. If you're not going to maintain the home, you're sure not going to pay for the insurance, right? Because that's expensive, and you're not going to do that. And if you're not going to do that, you're certainly not going to, pay for property tax, because now all of a sudden, I mean, I don't even live there. Why am I paying property tax on a home that I don't get to enjoy? My sister or my brother needs to do that, right? So these challenges frequently lead to all kinds of other problems, right? So all of a sudden, you have ad valorem tax delinquencies, or you have a property casualty loss, right? That there's no insurance to do this. This is becoming increasingly on a national level as well. Folks are foregoing property insurance, and then they have a loss, and it's like, okay, now what do we do? So the deterioration of housing, safety, habitability, all of these ultimately compound into destabilized neighborhoods, increase the risk of displacement, foreclosure, gentrification, and just generally affect the bienestar of the community itself. Their mental health, their physical health as well. I'm not picking on anyone, but I have to, following with Leila's example, or her admonishment is like stick to the, this not Leila's, but just in general, as a group, we decided, I'm sorry, Leila, I was already picking on you, but as a group, we said, yeah, it would be good to sort of provide examples of this as well, to sort of illuminate. And one of the things that I thought, came into my mind when I was thinking about this is it's not uncommon for a widow to visit the Mock Housing Center, and she arrives and she is kind of startled to find out that she doesn't have clear marketable title to a home that she's lived in for 30, 40, and sometimes even 50 years. And so when we question her, she says, well, I thought I did everything right. I went to the Bear Appraisal District, and when I told them my husband had passed away, they said, just bring a copy of his death certificate and we'll change the name to you. So she does as what, instructed. She brings the death certificate. Not understanding that whole process is just administrative for the appraisal district. It has no legal bearing whatsoever on the title of the property. The title is still in her husband and hers name, in both their names. The legal title And so this is, you know, in a sense, the appraisal district is solving a problem, right? They're solving, seemingly they're solving her problem by just simply saying bring in the death certificate. But in essence, it's creating yet another problem, the problem of fractionalized ownership. And as people continue to die off and things change and what have you, it just further compounds the problem. And so I think this illustrates kind of the problem with a problem-solving approach, right? And so what's really required is a system that takes all of this sort of into account, right? A comprehensive perspective that integrates multiple policy tools, viewpoints, etc. The last thing I'm just gonna kind of touch on, because I think this can get lost in a systems approach, but I think it's very important, is engaging with both communities and activist movements for addressing housing affordability. Activists play a vital role in challenging conventional housing policies and advocating for housing justice. But activism alone cannot substitute for tangible progress. We owe each other a duty of good faith and fair dealing. And simply, you know, feigning support for community goals when the necessary framework is absent or impractical undermines trust. And all of these initiatives move at the speed of trust. And that can't be compromised. What's needed is a systems approach where folks co-create with community and other entities, right? So that we can move the ball forward. This takes time. It is not easy. It can be messy. But the systems perspective that values the voices of those most affected ensures that the solutions are both effective and equitable. So that's what I would say about how we kind of work things.
Thank you, Dr. Enriquez.
I have nothing else to offer. Thank you, Dr. Enriquez. I am a fan of dissonance and chaos theory, only because I think after a while it starts to come into focus kind of what your real issue is. So my work is in the gray, constantly. So I work at the intersection of systems and trying to understand workforce, trying to understand public works. And if you've ever tried to understand public works, it's a long process. But transportation, all of these other systems. If you start with the assumption that housing is infrastructure, like water, like energy, then you realize that it's vital to every other system of work that we do in our community. The challenge is, how do those systems intersect in very real ways? Not, yeah, Mark, that's a great idea, we should do that one day. So one day's now, so how do we do that now? So I think, I don't know if Pete Alanis is still here, but yeah, you're not in trouble, Pete. That is one example of workforce and housing. So it was a simple idea. Pete said, you know, we're looking at trying to do some collaboration, and one of the issues that constantly comes up is workforce, and people are having to drive across town after work to try to get this training through the Ready to Work program. What if they simply had Ready to Work at the sites that the Housing Trust was developing? Simple idea. However, and even once the pomp and circumstance happens and everybody gets to pat themselves on the back and take credit for things, then the real, as Pete would say, then the real work starts. Then you have to work through, well, who's gonna do this, who's gonna do that, you know, how are you gonna make this piece of work? That is, I think, sometimes what's missing in all of this is, how do we make these things work? Not only just solve problems at a systems level, you know, not at a systems level, but an immediate problem, but how do we piece all of that together? And it's not as hard as you think, but you have to think. And I think that's the key point, is you have to sit back for a moment and you have to look at, and if you go to a person perspective, I find that's the best place to start. Because the person will identify for you what the barriers are to whatever they're trying to achieve. You're gonna find consistency with those issues across multiple systems. You're gonna find it, whether it be childcare, whether it be transportation, whether it be education, whether it be literacy, whatever the case may be. I can't get off of work, I can't go do this, I can't go do that. What if we understood that and modeled our systems approach in a way that met people where they were? Let me say that again. What if we changed the way we modeled our systems approach to meet people where they were? That is, from my perspective, the right starting point for systems integration, because it will give you immediate feedback on what's working and what's not working, right? We can put language, we're really good at putting language and programs around, and boxes around the different things that we work on. You know, I work in this lane, I work in this lane. And believe me, I'm about people working in lanes, and I'm also about having people push in the same direction. That's really the goal of systems work, is everybody pushing in the same direction. So, you know, but if we can start with where people are, and we build from there, we will quickly identify what the issues are. Now, the big piece in all of this work is will. Who has the will to be able to let go of some of what you have towards that common good? I see this a lot in housing work. I see this a lot with bond projects. I see this a lot now as we have conversations around transit-oriented development. Who's willing to let something go? So there can't be a complete winner. Somebody has to let some piece of it. And so understanding what that is, and I'll underline the understanding part of it. It is important in these systems intersection discussions to really have a vital and fundamental understanding. I have to understand what is important to LISC and why, and not just listening to Leila and shaking my head because I'm already forming an answer to her question, but really listening, why is this important to them, and how is this going to advance their future work? Because everyone that I run into in systems work is looking to advance their work. They have goals. They're doing this for a reason. I know the public sector is getting beat up right now. I'm proud to be in the work with you all in public sector. This is important work. It's vital work. A lot of our work never gets seen, and we don't want it to be seen. We know that we'll see it down the road at some point. So I want us to feel good today about the work that we're doing and to feel empowered in our work, because it is vital. It is important. And I know we're taking a beating right now, but understanding what that is and why it's important will further your ability to create intersections, because then people will begin to understand, oh, I think he has a fundamental understanding of what I'm trying to do. And now, oh, I can see how that links into what they're trying to do with housing. These are just lessons that, in working in the gray, I've come up with as ways to advance the collaboration. So there's been a lot of discussion around collaboration today. That just doesn't happen. There's a lot of trust. Trust, I think, is probably first. There's a lot of communication. There's a lot of disagreement at times, but that's fine. I mean, I think you can always find a common ground in which to kind of work forward. So, Lorraine, I think in my experience, those are fundamentals at the systems intersection point and how we can kind of move some of the work forward.
Very good.
I think everyone said everything already. So, but really, I think I'm coming in here from VIA's perspective, and as we're seeing opportunities in our region changing in a very significant way, we wanted to align our resources to where this change is occurring. We have efforts underway that I think people are familiar with. If not, I'll just mention them quickly. The Keep SA Moving Plan, Via Rapid Green Line. It's essentially bus rapid transit and dedicated lanes on the north-south corridor, the San Pedro corridor, to provide better service to our community, to our customers, to get them from point A to point B, meaning more access to jobs, more access to healthcare, more access to the opportunities that they're seeking. Via Rapid Silver Line, it's on the horizon as well, looking at 2030 launch time. Similar system, similar effort as it pertains to the Via Rapid Green Line. And then we have this other comprehensive approach, the Better Bus Plan, which is really, like has been shared here, a comprehensive overview and look at our system to see where we can align our resources, where they stand today to where the community is changing. So that's VIA in a nutshell, but the conversation on systems and where we are as a community and what we're discussing here right now goes beyond even that. I think what I'm hearing thematically from my colleagues here on the panel is a true intentional approach to public policy that has stakeholder engagement in a meaningful way at the forefront, so that as you're having conversation with your neighbors, with your neighborhood association president, with your elected official, with the business development person, the person who's looking at that land use opportunity, if they're a land use developer, is whatever the focal point may be, is being intentional about having that cross-sectional approach to the public policy conversation, realizing as a collective, as a community, what is it that we can achieve together in a pragmatic sense that's going to net the most benefit for us, recognizing fundamentally we may not get everything that we want, but if we start having those conversations in earnest, as we're looking to bring more people to the table to say, hey, we realize that this is a particular issue, what can we do as a community to address that? I think in those moments, you start to see those indicators of, you know what, there's shared value, there's shared trust. These are the things that I think that we can accomplish together. We may not get everything, again, that we want, but we're gonna start inching in the right direction that's gonna make our community a better environment today and for the future. So that's a little bit beyond VIA, that's more philosophical, but if we have that approach, I think we're gonna be a better community for it as we continue to have those meaningful conversations.
I just want to add to that, or to build on that, looking at an issue from a systems perspective doesn't exclude the individual. And at LISC we use a model, think of just concentric circles. At the heart of every issue are people. And that could be the client that you're serving, but it could also be every one of you in this room. If you get up in the morning and you just can't do it anymore, then we haven't supported you to be part of a solution. So that's support for individuals, whether they're clients, whether they're elected officials who need education or information or a path forward to take a step, or whether it's people who are providing services. But then the organizations that they're within, this is the next concentric circle, those organizations need to be able to support you as an individual. You need to get paid an adequate salary, you need to have efficient information management systems, your board needs to be informed about what they ought to be doing. But surrounding all that is the system level. And it's the old thing, who's heard the thing about the river? You're standing by the river, the bodies are coming down the river. Has anybody heard this about the river? You can pull people out of the river all day long. But at some point you have to say, why are people being thrown in the river? And that's the systems approach. So you don't stop helping at the point where someone is drowning. You help them and you help yourself be there for them. But then you ask the question about, why is this continuing to happen? And that systems thinking is not just treating the symptom of, well, we don't have enough ridership, therefore we need to reduce fares, but saying, well, are there sidewalks? Can people get to our bus stops? Do we have people living close? So I think that it would be wrong to draw a dichotomy between person-centered work and systems-centered work. Systems work doesn't happen unless you have the people engaged.
So we're gonna stay in this vein of transit-oriented development, and we had the opportunity when we went to a conference in Chicago to visit with one, and it was amazing because it was right on the L line, and you could see the multifamily, which was beautiful, but you also had a lot of single-family housing around it. You had duplexes, fourplexes. It was very active. Lots of individuals on the street and taking the train. So when we think about San Antonio, and I know we've never had anything like it, but we've got future plans. Is there any low-hanging fruit? Is there something that we could focus on as a group, as partners in this room, that would help move that forward?
So transit-oriented development, an exciting effort that the City of San Antonio, in partnership with a whole host of stakeholders, including VIA, as to what transit-oriented development should look like for our community. You know, to get back to what I was saying just a moment ago about meaningful stakeholder engagement as part of this public policy process to help formulate what that looks like, the community was clear in the feedback provided to the city about what transit-oriented development should be. In fact, it provides more protections to neighborhood associations and provides some incentives for folks to leverage the policy itself should they choose to go and advance a transit-oriented development related activity. Now, via not having land use authority per state statute, something that municipalities enjoy as part of their planning process.
For the time being.
For the time being. But part of that is really what can we do to provide that access to reliable, efficient, frequent transit? And the Via Rapid Green Line, like I mentioned, the Via Rapid Silver Line are examples of that. But even so, as we're looking at, okay, do we want to continue to sprawl out and make maybe not the best use of the limited resources we have as a community? The cost of transportation projects is going to continue to increase. If we're looking at having more lanes on highways or even on key corridors of our community, there's all these different constraints and factors that we have to take into account as we're looking at those developments. So it's taking inventory of what's there. What can we do to improve upon where we stand today to have maybe greater density, to move people quickly through our region in a more effective and efficient manner? And transit, in transit's role, it can help move those people effectively through our region.
Anybody else want to comment?
Yeah, I mean, I'll add that the benefits of having more people in a smaller space are beyond just making something more affordable, right? So if you've got one lot and you can build 3 houses on it, the houses are probably going to be more affordable than just that one house. But the benefits are also, and we see this with ADUs, and we don't give ourselves enough credit for this, San Antonio was one of the first cities in the country to say, if you have a single family home and you don't have a deed restriction on it, you can put an ADU on there as of right, meaning anybody can do it, you don't need special approval. That got passed 20-something years ago and absolutely nothing happened. So we did this whole big, huge thing that was groundbreaking and would still be innovative in a lot of communities, and nothing happened. Because the framework to help people understand this is an opportunity for your aging mom, this is an opportunity for your kid who's coming home from college, this is an opportunity for you to make some extra money, that framework didn't go up around the change in policy. So it's like, if a tree falls in the forest and nobody hears it, nothing happens. I mean, so we had the policy in place, we just didn't have the programming around it. And ADUs are a perfect example of a way that you increase density, but you achieve other goals as well. Something that got mentioned earlier about heirs property issues, one way of looking at the problem that we have when you don't have clear title to your home is that a lot of our programs that are focused on benefit to the homeowner. Just think about that for a minute when we talk about, we're gonna do some homeownership counseling. We're gonna train you how to do X. But the home exists as a physical structure in other systems. It's part of our energy use system. It's part of our public safety system. So if you can focus on how does improvement to that house benefit that system, then you don't need clear title. Because when you fix the roof, you're not benefiting the homeowner, you're making the burden of providing extra energy less for all of us. None of us want to have to pay for CPS to build another energy plant, right? They're incredibly expensive. If we can just dial down energy that we're already using by fixing the roof on that property, we shouldn't care whether X person or 30 people benefit as partial owners of that home. We're trying to have an impact on energy costs. Same thing with the health system. The single biggest predictor of whether someone's going to be readmitted to the hospital is whether they have stable housing or not. Do you want to pay more taxes to University Health System? Because people keep getting readmitted 5 or 6 or 7 times? No. If we fix the floor and the stairs to that home, then that person is not going to get readmitted and our overall burden is going to go down. It's not really relevant whether the home actually belongs to that person or not. So if we can just take housing out of that framework of ownership, and by the way, the words we use for housing, when we surveyed the community and we asked people, does a home have to have a yard? Almost 80% of everyone who responded to this public perception survey said, yes, a real home has a yard. So you can talk about apartment homes all you want, but most people, when they hear home, they think something very specific. And I think that's part of our discussion here is how do we talk about these things in a way, and no disrespect, like I totally love statutory authority and land use, but most people listening to that are like, I don't know what that guy's talking about. I have no idea what that means. So to some extent, this falls back on this work that the city and others are engaged in right now to try to make even this conversation intelligible and interesting to people.
The thing I would add around transit-oriented development is think about the green line and where it starts and stops. Think about the silver line where it starts and stops. And start to take an inventory of what's already there. You know, just think about that first. I mean, obviously on the housing side, you know, we'll be looking for opportunities along those lines to create. Because from my perspective, I'd love for people to have a double net benefit, housing that's affordable, and then access to transit so they're not having to take their savings from affordability and put it into a vehicle, but actually have a double net benefit would be great. But are there parks around in your inventory? Are there schools around in your inventory? Culturally, what exists along those corridors that could be amplified because it represents the community that you live in? So I think that to me is systems thinking. It's a systems approach is to look what's already there. It's to engage the people that are already there and to see how they want to be a part of that. So it's a way to break down kind of these concepts into what we're trying to do. I was talking to somebody in Austin this week and they said, we had to rethink the way that we present things to people because the way we've been doing it is just not working. Because either people don't understand or they do and they don't care because it doesn't seem to relate to them. So I think that I was just thinking about this from a systems perspective. I want to go back and start just inventorying what's available.
Yeah. Dr. Enriquez, any comment?
Sure. I definitely think that, you know, these are not mutually exclusive. You know, working with the community and systems approach are not mutually exclusive. They absolutely can work in tandem. There's no doubt that transit-oriented developments and those things, these major investments have the potential to make tremendous impact across a number of different institutions. But and to Mark's point with respect to, you know, we have to explain this in a different way. I think that the issue is, it has to be a very, you know, at the granular level, almost at the household level, we have to be able to explain to folks what is the upside for you. Because we are really in an era right now where folks see things as a zero-sum kind of thing. I win, you lose. I take this from you, you're not going to get what you thought you were going to, back and forth. That really is a very dangerous place to go because you're just not going to be able to do much of anything, which then, you know, does end up actually creating a race to the bottom. Yeah. So again, this is why I think community and that needs to be in the front, because that's where you have the opportunity to co-develop, co-create, co-locate all these different things so that you create sort of an irresistible force around whatever it is, if it's transit-oriented development or whatever it is. But it takes time, and unfortunately, you know, that almost always seems to be the problem. It's like we're behind this and we need it right away and we have to spend this or we have to do this, you know, and again, this is why intentionality is so important, because you're not going to hit what you're not aiming for, you know, and that you have to start with the end first and then work backwards from there. And if it takes 5 years, guess what? It takes 5 years. This university is only a little over 50 years old. Look what we've built together. And I think the merger and all these other things illustrates what is possible when you take the long approach.
So just to emphasize that, we're working right now on the Thriving Communities program, the local Thriving Communities program with partners like VIA, OCI, Velocity Texas, SAGE, Prosper West. We are planning for Silver Line work, but not a specific development or design of anything. What we're planning for is building the capacity for the community along the line to be an active participant in the changes that may happen along the Silver Line. So this is a dedicated position and effort, and the primary goal is anti-displacement from our perspective. Because you can't wait until a year before something happens and say, well, what do people think about this? Because as you mentioned earlier, people know when you ask them that you can say whatever you want, the plan's already set. And I've heard people at meetings say, why are you asking me? I know what you're gonna do. The more we do that kind of thing, the deeper a hole we're digging. By just going out and having a town hall, we're not solving the problem, we're making the problem worse. So start now. Look 5 or 6 years down the road. Try to figure out what information and resources you need to get into the hands of folks so that they can be treated as a partner. And again, that advocacy, demanding to be at the table, but then having the information and being able to say, I know you can do this because I saw it done in the Twin Cities, or I saw it done in this other. And so it's a long-term vision. And the other piece of this is, you know, I don't even want to talk to Spurs fans right now. I'm so depressed about where we are. But I've been using this analogy for a while. So yes, you get points scored, you get blocks, but you also get assists. And most of the work that we do, we really don't count assists. And that's why I'm sad to see Iris leaving the essay report, because a lot of her reporting focused on people who are giving assists and recognizing that is part of the way a functioning system works. And so just thinking about how we give, you know, everyone likes to have KPIs, but how many indicators of your success are tied to someone else succeeding?
One final thought on this topic is, and what are you learning as you go through this? How many times do we embark on a 10-year plan or whatever the case may be, and we're locked into that plan? And we get so much evidence that comes in us that maybe is not necessarily challenging your plan, but is just saying, I think that was true 3 years ago, but today it's this. So what are you going to do with that information? How are you going to incorporate? How are you going to understand it? Are you willing to understand it? How are you going to incorporate it? And how's it going to be reflective of your reality today? That says a lot to people, because whether we believe it or not, people are paying attention. They are watching. And if it's just like you have this dogged determination to stay on track with what your plan says, then I think you miss opportunity. You miss potential partnership. You miss potential systems because you're not incorporating what you're learning through that whole process. So data evaluation, all of those things that in today's environment may seem as fluff are vital because it's constantly tracking what's going on. It's constantly giving you information. But if you do not have that built into your systems approach, you're missing something.
Yeah. And fantastic conversation all the way around. I think part of the conversation needs to focus on, I think, Lila, you're making a great point about, statutory regulation and kind of, who that is going to resonate with. So keeping in mind key audiences as you're having conversations, like I'm saying, encouraging this intentional approach to stakeholder engagement, whatever your expertise or what you're focused on, because you want to invite people who you realize that you may not be able to reach. As an example, if my wife and I, we need to go and get our son and daughter from daycare, well, we're gonna miss that public meeting and we're gonna miss that opportunity to provide feedback. That's something that many people struggle with. So how do you provide that forum in which people could participate otherwise? And then also being clear as an agency, What kind of feedback are you looking for? The last thing an agency should do is be wasting your precious time and saying, hey, we're having this open house, come check it out, we want to hear from you, but we're not being clear about what the ask is. As an example, for the Via Rapid Silver Line, this last round of outreach, we're very intentional about asking, okay, what is it that you're looking for in terms of station locations? What is it, the design features? What are these other components that you can help us build a system that's reflective of the community in which this project's going to be? And so when you're being intentional about that from an agency perspective and inviting that conversation in a meaningful way, you can have a collective approach to providing a solution for your community. I think, and again, I'll just really, to hit the point home, is that it is incredibly challenging to have these meaningful conversations when we have so many distractions in the world today. So as we're trying to take and think of this very abstract systems approach to everything that we have before us, I'm competing for your time because you just found out you can get TikTok back from the App Store. You know, I need to know what's going on with Ryan Reynolds. I need to know what's going on with the Oscars, Grammys. I need to know something about the Super Bowl. I need to know all these details, but that distraction is taking away from the progress that we may be able to accomplish as a community. So focusing on the right priorities, focusing on the things that truly matter to help us be more successful as a community, and having this comprehensive systems approach is integral to our long-term success, both for your individual quality of life and the economic prosperity that we can enjoy, and making sure that we have somewhere to be and somewhere to provide for families here in San Antonio.
And how can we say that on TikTok?
Yeah, yes.
That's right.
Well said. Thank you. Thank you all. So we're going to pivot very quickly. I know we're running out of time, but beyond transportation, what other innovations hold promise for creating more interconnected, inclusive, and affordable communities?
I was just reading a report that I think really is germane to this, because Adrian's here, so I'm going to make him stop looking at his phone and look up over here for a second. So I'm looking at this Metro. It's okay. I've known him for a while, and I think he's taking this in the spirit in which I mean it, which is to recognize that what he does is completely foundational to all of our work, which is workforce, right? So we have heard just recently, there's no one to build houses right now. People are too afraid to show up on the job site. Even before crackdown on immigration, we know that there are skilled trades, deficits in skilled trades. We can talk all we want about having 10,000, 20,000 new units. Someone has to build those units. Someone has to have the skills to renovate that house if we want to repair a 100-year-old house. So the absolute foundational importance of workforce is relatively new. That awareness is relatively new in our community. 10 years ago, the Economic Development Foundation of the time said workforce is not economic development. That's not related to what we do. We do business recruitment and retention, and that's workforce is someone else's bailiwick. I think that no one would buy that today. And in this report I was just reading, one of the focal points was on childcare as an essential element of economic development. So we are making, I think, a lot of progress in recognizing that this is a person-centered approach, because you've got to have a person to do the work. And that's basically what workforce is about, making sure that there are individuals. In fact, this is an element of heirs property work. When we started identifying how many bilingual property attorneys are there, real estate attorneys in San Antonio, it's not a very big number. And you can't just go to any attorney, right? You can't go to someone who's used to dealing with custody cases and ask them to do title clearance work. It's very specialized work. So the acknowledgement that growing people's skills and capacity to be part of any solution, I think we're well on the road to doing that in San Antonio, and probably more further along that road than a lot of other areas are.
I would say another opportunity, and I don't know if Simone's still here or not, but I think there's an opportunity between systems in helping the entire community begin to create new frames on what housing affordability is. All right, so you say affordable housing, what's the image that comes to people's minds? Right? And it may be the image that's in your mind right now, I don't know. But to me, what people have said, well, I think of a high rise that's falling down and people are doing drugs outside. That is a picture in people's minds. So, and when I take people and I drive them to Los Arcos de Vida, I think that Deborah's still here, they're like, oh, well, this is beautiful. I mean, I could live here, but where's the affordable housing? this is the affordable housing. Have you seen that badass pool that they have out there? It's beautiful, right? It's nice, but the frame. And how many frames, Adrian, how many frames exist in your work, right? There's frames that people have about workforce. Oh, that, you know, these are people that quit high school. No, it's across the gamut. So collectively, how do we begin to create new frames about the systems that are all interconnected to this work? I think it's important. It helps address NIMBY, but it educates people. I mean, we're doing some work, you know, with the public information campaign at the city, with Reframing Housing at the Area Foundation, with a lot of different partners. I think that's an opportunity for us, because hopefully all of these systems are doing work in this space, but we don't know what each other's doing in this space, and I think collectively we can get a lot further. I think some of these issues are person to person. I think some of these things are gonna happen on somebody's deck in their backyard, if they have a deck in their backyard or wherever, right? That's where the conversation needs to happen, but people need to have a little bit more information.
Dr. Enriquez?
Yeah, I think there are a number of opportunities that are available. The Community Land Trust, I think that shows tremendous promise. And in the different, in a number of different ways as well. I'll just be very quick because I have to put in a shameless plug for the university, in the sense that, you know, the collaboration with UTSA, or because we have a number of faculty, as you guys were speaking about transit-oriented development. I know Ian Kane, who's on the third floor here, has already mapped out both the Silver and Green Line and looked at land parcels that are either vacant or underdeveloped, and is coming up with different typologies that could go on that land, right? So I think one of the systems is, don't forget higher ed.
Yeah.
Don't forget the institutions like UTSA, A&M, all of them, because that would be the one of the ways to kind of move all of these things forward. The very last one, of course, and this one is things like community benefits agreements. It is very likely that in the not too distant future, San Antonio, Bexar County will have a decision to make around what they do around Hemisphere and things like that. Again, to my earlier comment, what is the upside for everyone? How do we benefit? And then, because if you don't sort of think of this intentionally and have some sort of community benefits agreement in place or something along those lines, it becomes catch as catch can with different folks kind of. I always remember Woody Sanders, who literally next door to me in my office, says, Roger, San Antonio never plans, we just make deals. And I'm like, yeah, Woody, okay. And strange enough, over the time, that has actually been a pretty true statement, and I hope that we move away from that, because that is the antithesis of intentionality. It's just, you know, catch as catch can.
Can I just say, I think we actually do a great job at making plans. We just haven't always done a great job at implementing the plans that we make. Oh, I know Woody. But I think that's where Mark comes in, right? So with the SHIP, there's actually a person that is now on the hook for the SHIP, and with the homeless strategic plan, that's Mark. So having somebody, and having the Housing Commission be responsible for oversight, that's also a step forward. But just on the language issue, think about how different your answer to this question would be. Do we need more affordable housing in San Antonio? Should housing in San Antonio be less expensive? Almost everyone believes that housing should be less expensive, even the people who don't believe that we need more affordable housing. So there really is a difference in how we, in the language, you know, that we use.
Yeah, you could say Mark on the hook one more time.
Mark! Lots of interesting conversation. We want to go ahead and open it up to questions from the audience. Is there anyone who would like to pose a question?
Well, just what Mr. B.
Mr. B, all right.
So hello, I think I've heard your presentation before about the green and silver lines, but I left before you could tell me, as someone who's working with homeless and having clients who have to make appointments and they're catching the bus, the current bus system is maybe 2 hours, depending on where you want to go. If you want to drop a kid off at daycare and they get to an appointment, they go, so all of that, how is that going to benefit every community, not just, you know, the demographic? I think what you're trying to put them, I think, if I heard you right, on that San Pedro Road, but how is this new thing that VA coming up with going to help our most impoverished communities get to where they need to be, not be late for work and get fired, and drop their kids off to daycare? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot.
No.
But it's the substance I heard your presentation.
No, this is a great follow-up. Yes. No, thank you.
Great question.
So, you know, she's right in a lot of ways. You know, we want to do more as a transit agency. There is a lot of opportunity for us to improve. And while we do have really exciting projects underway, like the Via Rapid Green Line, like the Via Rapid Silver Line, what you're not hearing too much on that's actively underway right now is called our Better Bus Plan, which is kind of that third pillar of the Keep SA Moving plan that was before voters in November 2020. So with that reallocation of sales tax that's coming to via January 2026, thanks to the voters of San Antonio, we can start making some more investments in the frequency of service that we're providing. And we're doing as much as we can now with the funding we have to date. And that means getting rid of anything that's 30 minutes or greater in terms of frequency. So we only have 30 minutes or better. So whether you're using the Via Rapid Green Line or the Silver Line, which will have that 12-minute or so frequency during the weekday, we'll have other supporting routes that are remarkably improved as we continue to finalize this Better Bus Plan and take it to the board for adoption later this early summer. With that comes not just the fixed route service, which again would have that frequency improvement to help reduce that travel time, is the other innovative piece that we could offer is this Via Link service, which is that Uber or Lyft-like service without the Uber or Lyft-like price tag. So for $1.30, or if you're a city employee, county employee, student at UTSA, you ride at no charge. And we have several discounts as well as associated with that fare structure, which is the same as our fixed routes. So we have several zones now within the San Antonio region, and with the Better Bus Plan, we're looking at, okay, what's that next zone to help connect people to other jobs, healthcare, education, whatever the opportunity may be. So happy to connect more one-on-one since you've heard the other part of the presentation already. Yes, so thank you.
Thank you for answering that question, because if you didn't answer it all the way, I was going to set up again and say,
and I'm not leaving.
No, I would do that, right? But thank you very much for taking the time to make it a little bit clearer for me.
Of course, and happy to stick around and visit some more about it too. Okay, yes, of course.
And let me address really quickly that's basically what Thriving Communities is about, is looking to models in other areas. In Kansas City, for example, the transit agency created spaces for child care centers to be co-located at transit stops. So the other transit agencies have some more powers that our local folks don't have as much of, but there are models out there, because we know that one of the biggest impediments to people being able to use transit is not being able to access kids. And who does that mainly affect? Women, right? We have the bulk of the responsibility for child care, and if your kid gets sick and you can't get to them, that's the worst case scenario, right? So co-locating stops with childcare is one of the sort of state-of-the-practice solutions in other places.
Thank you.
Excellent. We have another question.
Mine's more of a statement. I'm Housing Commissioner Abraham, and this is to build off of yours, Professor. It's about the homestead exemption. I'm going to be Debbie Downer here for just a second, and I want to build it up afterwards. But currently, in a homestead situation, husband and wife, one of them passes away. In all of the plethora of solicitations and that they get in the mail, they've got to look for a letter from Bearcat that says you need to reapply for your homestead exemption. And if they miss that, their property taxes are gonna go up $3,000, $4,000, $5,000. So we need to go over and talk to our friend Rogelio over there and find out how can we stop this.
She's right behind you. She's right behind you.
Thank you for that. We're going to go ahead and have to wrap up, but I would like for you to join me in an applause for our fantastic panel and great conversation.
All right, we touched on a few items throughout the day. You discussed what the past looked like, the recent past. You talked about what the legislative landscape looks like now. And then you also touched a little bit briefly on what the future looks like. And the future is not guaranteed. We know this. Folks, we are facing a period of uncertainty that at the federal level that few of us have seen ever. The new administration's policies and actions created significant challenges for affordable housing. And some of those systematic disruptions can come daily. And we've, as an organization, Opportunity Home never had to scramble as much as they did. One particular February morning, or January morning, when they received news about suspension of several funding items. Those types of disruptions we have to account for. And before I'm sort of like Commissioner Abe down there, I don't want to make it all bleak. But what I am excited about is that through the leadership at the City of San Antonio, through the Strategic Housing Implementation Plan, Mark Camona's office, and all of the city partners that gathered together and have created ways, not just in development, but in responsibility. Every nonprofit out there that partnered, whether it be from the Ready to Work site, whether it be from LISC, whether it be from our friends at the San Antonio Housing Trust, even our friends at Bexar County Housing, everybody's looking for different options. When I assumed my role as chair at this organization, I came in with, we are stronger together. That is how we will continue the next 4 years. And that's what we have to do to continue the next 4 years. We have to look for innovative ways that can help support our community and most importantly, the families that we are serving. They rely on us, they can count on us, and we have to double down our efforts in order to do that. As part of that plan, I'm excited to see what Opportunity Home is moving forward with. They are launching a comprehensive 12-year strategic planning process to lead this organization to its 100th anniversary in 2037. It doesn't just look at the 2027 potential bond that'll come out by the city, but it's also looking beyond that. The innovative ways that we can bring more doors to the city. We need more units. We need units at all levels. And this organization is committed to protect our families as well as all levels that, as y'all heard it previously referred to the AMI spectrum. We serve all those families. And it's how do we do this together? What we know that's going to happen at the federal level is we may not see new funding, but that just means we get to now partner together on more deals that'll help rise those unit counts, because that's what we need done. This doubling down by our organizations is what's going to make this city better off, and it's going to provide those units that are necessary. And again, I will stress this, at all levels of affordability are needed. And the most vulnerable in our community that we're already serving, we want to make sure that their protections remain in place. And this organization, under the direction of the Board of Commissioners that I serve with, have all said, as long as our families are protected, then we can move forward. And that's what we're aiming to do. I'm encouraged by the dedication, the passion that you've shown. You're sitting out here all day today, so thank you for doing so. Let's continue to innovate. Let's collaborate. Let's advocate for affordable housing. That's what we're here to do, and let's continue with that in our focus. So thank you again for your participation. Let's continue the important work together. Thank you.